Variation 1. This sentence is false. Let's start with the phrase, this sentence is false. At first glance, it looks like a normal sentence, but it quickly becomes a tricky puzzle when you try to decide if it is true or false. Here's why. The sentence talks about itself. When you read it, you see it claims to be false. But suppose you decide that the sentence is true. If it is true, then what it says must be correct. But it says it is false. That means if it's true, it must be false. On the other hand, if you decide the sentence is false, then the claim, this sentence is false, is not correct. In that case, it must be true. You end up going around in circles without finding a clear answer. Think of it like a light switch that never settles in one position. 1 minute it's supposed to be on, and the next it's off, always switching back and forth. It's also like a game where a rule says you lose if you win. So every time you try to win, you automatically lose. The sentence creates a loop that our usual rules of true and false cannot handle. This idea is similar to hearing someone say, "I never tell the truth." If you believe them, then their statement is a lie, and maybe they sometimes tell the truth. This back and forth makes it hard to decide what is really going on. In the same way, the sentence, "This sentence is false," keeps our minds busy because it refuses to settle into being simply true or false. The lesson here is that language can sometimes be more playful and puzzling than it seems. We learn that not every statement fits perfectly into our usual ideas of right or wrong, true or false. It shows us that when a sentence refers to itself, it can create a situation that seems to break the normal rules of logic. It challenges us to think harder about what we mean when we say something is true or false. This little sentence turns into a big puzzle, inviting us to explore ideas about truth and contradiction in a fun and surprising way. Variation 2. This statement is false. Now consider, this statement is false. The word statement here is almost the same as sentence, but it can feel a bit more formal or broad. So the idea remains. The statement tells us about itself by declaring it is false. If you try to label it as true, then its claim forces you to say it is false. But if you decide it is false, then its claim that it is false is not correct. So it must be true. The endless switch between true and false is just as puzzling here. Think about a note left on your locker that reads, "This note is false." If you try to figure out what it means, you run into the same problem. Accepting the note as true leads to a contradiction, and dismissing it as false leads back to it being true. It's like having a rule that keeps flipping on you and not letting you settle on an answer. A similar everyday example might be a friend who insists, "Everything I say is a lie." If you believe that, then even this statement would be a lie, meaning sometimes they are telling the truth. The fun and confusion comes from the self-reference that doesn't fit neatly into our usual way of thinking. This variation teaches us that sometimes the exact word we use, whether sentence or statement, doesn't change the problem. The heart of the puzzle is the idea of a phrase that talks about itself in a way that breaks the usual true/false rules. It reminds us that even when words seem clear, they can hide deeper puzzles when turned back on themselves. By exploring this twist, we learn that language can be playful and sometimes rebellious against simple categorization. This thought-provoking idea challenges our assumptions about what it means for something to be true, and it sparks curiosity about how we understand the words we use every day. Variation 3. This sentence is not true. Consider next the phrase, "This sentence is not true." The change from saying false to not true might seem small, but it still causes the same kind of confusion. The sentence makes a statement about itself. It claims it isn't true. If you decide the sentence is true, then what it says must hold, which means it isn't true. But if you decide it isn't true, then its claim that it is not true is false, meaning the sentence is actually true. Once again, you're caught in a loop with no clear answer. This is like a merry-go-round that keeps spinning without stopping. When you try to pin down whether the sentence is right or wrong, it keeps changing the rules. It's similar to someone saying, "What I'm saying right now is not correct." When you try to decide if that is correct or not, you end up with the same puzzle. A simple everyday analogy might be thinking about a sign in a park that reads, This sign is not correct. If you try to trust the sign, you soon find that its message contradicts itself. This kind of playful contradiction shows us that some sentences create confusion because they talk about themselves in a way that mixes up what is true and what isn't. What this variation does is invite us to see that even small changes in wording don't stop the paradox from happening. Whether you say false or not true, the sentence still ends up being a puzzle that challenges our clear-cut ideas of honesty and correctness. It makes us question how we decide if a statement is trustworthy or not. By pondering this sentence, we learn that language isn't always straightforward. Even something as simple as, "This sentence is not true," opens up a whole world of questions about meaning and logic. It shows that our everyday words can lead to big puzzles that keep our minds active and curious, always reminding us to think a little more about what we assume to be obvious. Variation 4. This statement is untrue. Let's look at "this statement is untrue." Here, the word untrue is used instead of false or not true. The meaning remains much the same. The statement is talking about itself and claiming that it is untrue. If you decide the statement is correct, then its claim that it is untrue means it must be incorrect. But if you decide it is untrue, then it contradicts its own claim, suggesting that it might actually be true. This endless flip-flop creates the same kind of puzzle as the other variations. Think of it like a friend who says, "I am not honest." If you try to trust that friend's words, you quickly see the problem. If the friend is honest, then the claim is false. If the claim is false, then the friend might actually be honest. This self-contradiction is what makes the statement so intriguing and confusing. Another everyday way to understand it is to imagine a sticker on your notebook that says, "This sticker is untrue." When you read it, you start questioning what it means. If the sticker is correct, then it tells you it is untrue. But if it isn't correct, then maybe the sticker is actually telling the truth. The same loop appears again. This version shows that changing the wording doesn't remove the problem. Whether you say false, not true, or untrue, the sentence ends up challenging our basic rules about truth. It teaches us that self-reference, when something talks about itself, can break the usual idea that every sentence should be either true or false. The language plays a trick on us by not letting us have a clear answer. By exploring, "This statement is untrue," we learn that language can be full of surprises and puzzles. It reminds us that words sometimes have hidden depths and can make us think in unexpected ways. Even a small phrase can open up a world of questions about what truth really means, encouraging us to always look a little deeper into the meaning of the words we use. Variation 5. This sentence is a lie. Finally, consider, "This sentence is a lie." This version uses the word lie, which brings in ideas about honesty and trust. When a sentence claims it is a lie, it is saying that what it says is not honest. If you decide that the sentence is telling the truth, then its claim that it is a lie means it must be lying. But if you decide it is lying, then the sentence is not a lie after all. It is telling the truth. The same endless cycle of switching between truth and falsehood happens here, just like in the other variations. Think of it as a situation where someone in your class, known for joking around, tells you, "I am lying right now." You quickly find yourself wondering if they are being serious or just messing with you. The sentence, "This sentence is a lie," works the same way by forcing you into a puzzle where nothing can be decided easily. You might compare it to a record that keeps playing the same confusing loop over and over again. No matter how hard you try to decide if the sentence is honest or not, you end up in the same circular argument. It's as if the words are playing a game where they never let you win by settling on one answer. This version helps us see that the idea of a lie is closely related to being false. It shows that when a sentence talks about itself, it can disrupt our usual expectations about honesty. It reminds us that even a simple sentence can create big questions about what we consider to be true or a lie. Through "This sentence is a lie," we learn that language sometimes surprises us with puzzles that don't have easy answers. It challenges our common sense and invites us to explore the tricky boundaries between truth and deception, encouraging us to think more deeply about the words we use every day. Variation 6. I am lying right now. The statement, I am lying right now, sounds like something someone might casually say, but it hides a tricky puzzle. When a person says this, they claim that everything they are saying at that moment is not true. Let's break it down. If you decide the speaker is telling the truth, then the statement, I am lying right now, must be accurate. But if it is accurate, that means the person is lying, which contradicts the idea that they are being honest. On the other hand, if you decide the statement is false, then it means the person is not lying, so they must be telling the truth. This back and forth creates a loop that never settles on a clear answer. Think of it like a roller coaster that goes up and down with no stop. When you try to figure out if the person is honest, every answer you consider ends up contradicting the other. It's like when someone known for playful teasing suddenly says, I never tell the truth. You quickly wonder if you can believe anything they say because the statement flips itself around. This puzzle shows how language can sometimes trap us in confusion. We usually expect sentences to be clearly true or clearly false, much like a light switch that is either on or off. But I am lying right now refuses to follow this rule. It challenges us to think about what it means to lie and whether a sentence can talk about itself without causing a mix-up. It's like a mirror reflecting another mirror, creating an endless pattern that never gives a straight answer. In everyday life, we enjoy clear and simple messages. However, when someone makes a self-referential statement like this one, it reminds us that words can sometimes play tricks on our brains. This sentence is a fun brain teaser that encourages us to think twice about what we assume is always true. It shows that language isn't always as simple as we expect. Even a short phrase can hide a puzzling secret about truth and falsehood. Variation 7. The sentence I am uttering is false. When a speaker says, the sentence I am uttering is false, the statement points right back to itself. It tells you that what is being spoken at that moment isn't true. If you decide the sentence is true, then its claim that it is false must be correct, which makes it false. But if you say it's false, then its claim isn't working out, which suggests it might be true. This back and forth means the sentence can't comfortably settle as simply true or false. Think about a classroom poster that reads, this poster is wrong. If you try to decide whether you should trust what the poster says, you quickly end up in a confusing loop. Accepting the poster as correct forces you to conclude it's wrong. Calling it wrong pushes you back to the idea that it might be right. The same circular problem appears in this self-talking sentence. It's similar to a friend who jokes, everything I say right now is a lie. When you hear that, you wonder if any of their words can be trusted. The statement, the sentence I am uttering is false, works the same way. It keeps your mind busy trying to decide if it's honest or not, and nothing seems to fit. This variation teaches us that even small changes in wording do not remove the confusion. When language refers to itself, it can create a loop that makes us question our basic ideas about truth. It's a playful reminder that our everyday words can sometimes lead us into a maze of ideas that don't have an easy exit. Variation 8. All I say is false, including this sentence. The sentence, all I say is false, including this sentence, is a bold claim. It means that every single word or idea the speaker expresses is a lie, even the statement itself. If you accept this claim as true, then everything the speaker says is false. But that includes the very statement you just heard, which then must be false. If it's false, then not everything the speaker says is a lie, and some statements might be true. This circular reasoning creates a confusing loop where nothing is clear-cut. Imagine someone in a group chat declaring, every message I send is a joke, even this one. You would find yourself scratching your head, trying to figure out whether to laugh or take it seriously. The sentence makes it hard to pin down the truth, as its claim undermines itself. This twist shows us that language can sometimes create puzzles by referring to all that it says, not just one sentence. It pushes us to consider that our words can break the usual true or false pattern. In normal conversation, we expect statements to either clearly be one or the other. But when a sentence talks about everything a person says, it turns into a playful challenge for our minds. The puzzle here reminds us that our expectations of honesty can be disrupted by self-referential words. It's a fun exercise that makes you wonder how language works and whether there are limits to our everyday rules about truth. Even in simple conversation, words can sometimes hide surprises that force us to think a bit deeper. Variation 9. This sentence is a falsehood. The phrase, "this sentence is a falsehood," is yet another twist on the classic self-referential puzzle. The word falsehood simply means something that is not true. The sentence tells you about itself. It claims that it isn't true. If you decide to trust the sentence and say it is true, then its claim that it is a falsehood must be correct. But if it is indeed a falsehood, then the sentence isn't telling the truth, which suggests it might be true instead. This creates a loop that never finds a clear resting point between true and false. It's a bit like reading a note on a door that states, "This note is wrong." You start wondering whether the note should be trusted or ignored because its message contradicts itself. This simple sentence, by labeling itself as a falsehood, traps you in a circular argument that is both fun and confusing. This variation helps us see how a small change in wording, using falsehood instead of false, doesn't solve the puzzle at all. The self-reference remains, and the loop continues. It shows that language sometimes plays tricks on us by breaking the ordinary rules we expect from simple statements. Everyday messages are usually clear and easy to understand, but self-referential puzzles like this one remind us that words can have hidden layers. Even something as short as, "This sentence is a falsehood," invites us to look closer at what we assume about truth. It's a playful challenge that turns a simple sentence into a brain teaser, making us think about how we decide whether something is true or false. Variation 10. The following sentence is false. This sentence is false. This statement comes in two parts. The first part declares, "The following sentence is false," and the second part immediately gives you that sentence. This sentence is false. We've already seen that the sentence, "This sentence is false," creates a loop where it can't decide if it is true or false. The first part tells us to treat that tricky sentence as false. But if we say it is false, then it means it might actually be true, creating an even deeper circle. Consider it like a set of instructions that lead you back to the start. You are told to mark something as incorrect, but that very thing, when judged on its own, confuses you. It's like being given a rule in a game that says, "The next move is against the rules," and then watching that move happen. You're left wondering how the rule and the move can work together. This two-part puzzle shows us that when you combine a self-referential statement with an instruction about it, the confusion can multiply. The first part sets up an expectation, and the second part immediately disrupts it by using the classic paradox. It's a playful reminder that even a few extra words can make language twist and turn in unexpected ways. In everyday life, we like our messages to be clear and easy to understand. Yet, puzzles like this one reveal that sometimes words can work together to create challenges that force us to think harder about what truth really means. The following sentence is false. This sentence is false, is a fun, mind-bending example that shows how language can sometimes turn simple ideas into exciting puzzles, inviting us to explore the mysterious nature of truth and falsehood. Variation 11. This very statement is false. The sentence, "This very statement is false," tells you about itself. It says that exactly this sentence is not true. Let's break it down step by step. When you read it, you have to decide if it is true or false. Suppose you decide that the sentence is true. Then, because the sentence claims it is false, you must say that it is not true. This means that if it is true, it contradicts itself by saying it is false. Suppose you decide it is false. If the sentence is false, then its claim that it is false is not right. That means it would have to be true. You end up in a loop where neither choice gives a clear answer. Think of it like a seesaw that never settles. One moment, you say the seesaw is up, but then the other moment you see it must be down. In this case, the sentence cannot choose a side. It is caught between true and false. It's like a secret code that never lets you crack it because every time you think you have the answer, the sentence changes what it means. This version of the paradox reminds us that even small changes in wording, like adding very, do not stop the puzzling loop. It still plays with our ideas of what is true and what is false, making us work a little extra to understand the twist. This playful sentence teaches us that language sometimes has surprises hidden in simple words. Even a short sentence can turn into a big puzzle. It shows that when a sentence speaks about itself, our usual rules of true or false might not apply. The twist in "this very statement is false" makes it clear that words can be tricky. It asks us to look twice at our everyday ideas and shows that sometimes a few words can hide a mystery that makes our brains spin in a fun way. Variation 12. I am not telling the truth in this sentence. When someone says, "I am not telling the truth in this sentence," they are talking about their own words. Let's think about what that means. If you decide that the sentence is true, then the person is saying exactly what is happening. They are not telling the truth. But if they are not telling the truth, then the sentence itself must be a lie. That creates a problem. If the sentence is a lie, then it might be true. And if it is true, then it must be a lie. This push and pull makes it very hard to decide whether the sentence is honest or not. Consider a friend who sometimes jokes and says things like, "I never tell the truth in my jokes." If you take that at face value, you might get confused about whether to laugh or to take it seriously. The sentence, "I am not telling the truth in this sentence," does the same thing. It traps you in a loop where every answer leads to a contradiction. You try to decide if the person is honest, but every choice ends up flipping the answer around. This twist shows us that when language talks about itself, especially about truth and lies, it can create puzzles that make our everyday ideas of honesty seem uncertain. Just like a mirror that reflects another mirror over and over, this sentence reflects back on itself. Even though the words are simple, they lead to a big puzzle that keeps your mind busy. It reminds us that words can sometimes be playful and confusing. A short sentence like this makes us think about what it means to be honest and how our words work. Even if you use simple language every day, sometimes those words can create fun challenges that push us to think a little deeper. Variation 13. This declaration is false. In the sentence, "This declaration is false," the word declaration means a strong statement or claim. The sentence tells you that the claim it is making is not true. Let's follow the idea. If you decide that the declaration is true, then it must be correct. But it says it is false. This forces you to conclude that if it is true, then it must be false. On the other hand, if you decide the declaration is false, then its claim is not true, which implies that the declaration might actually be true. You are caught in a loop where you can't choose one clear answer. Think of it like a rule written on a board that says, "This rule is broken." If you try to follow the rule, you find that following it makes it not work. If you decide it doesn't work, then maybe it does work. The sentence, "This declaration is false," works the same way. It turns a simple idea into a puzzling circle that keeps spinning. This version of the paradox uses the word declaration instead of sentence or statement, but the puzzle remains the same. The important idea is that the sentence talks about itself, which makes it hard to decide whether it is right or wrong. Even though the words are easy to understand, they create a fun challenge for our minds. This puzzle teaches us that sometimes words have hidden tricks. It shows that language, even when simple, can play games with our ideas about truth. A sentence that claims its own falsehood makes us think twice about how we decide if something is true or not. It is a playful reminder that not every word fits neatly into being simply right or wrong. Variation 14. This utterance is false. The sentence, "This utterance is false," uses the word utterance to mean anything that is spoken or said. It tells you that what is being spoken is not true. Let's work through the idea. If you decide the utterance is true, then its claim must hold. That means it must be false, as it says. But if it is false, then the claim that it is false cannot be right, so it might be true. This back and forth makes it impossible to settle on one clear answer. Imagine reading a note on your desk that says, "This note is incorrect." You try to decide whether to trust it, but every time you do, you end up in a confusing circle. The sentence, "This utterance is false," works in a similar way. The word utterance is just another way of saying what is spoken, but the puzzle remains. It shows that the sentence turns itself into a loop, making it hard to tell if it is really right or wrong. This puzzle reminds us that language can sometimes trick us. Even a simple spoken line can hide a big mystery when it refers to itself. The sentence pushes us to think about the nature of truth in a playful way. It is like a puzzle that doesn't have a clear solution, which makes us wonder about the rules we normally use when we say something is true or false. It's a fun challenge that shows us that even everyday words can lead to surprising questions. When a sentence talks about itself in this way, it invites us to think a little deeper about what we usually take for granted. Variation 15. The truth of this sentence is false. This sentence tells you something about its own truth. The truth of this sentence is false. Let's break it down in simple steps. First, the sentence makes a claim about whether it is true or not. If you decide that the sentence is true, then its claim must be correct. But its claim is that its truth is false, so that would mean the sentence is not true. But if you decide that the sentence is false, then its claim that it is false is not working, which suggests that it might be true. This back and forth creates a loop where you cannot settle on one answer. Think of it like a traffic light that keeps switching from green to red without staying one color. When you try to decide whether to go or stop, you end up confused because the signal never gives a clear command. The truth of this sentence is false works in the same way. It keeps flipping back and forth, and no matter how hard you try, you can't decide if it is telling the truth. This puzzle shows us that words can sometimes play tricks on us. The sentence is simple, but because it talks about its own truth, it makes a circle that never ends. It is a reminder that not every sentence fits neatly into being just true or just false. Even small changes in wording can lead to a big puzzle. In everyday life, we expect clear messages. But puzzles like this one teach us that language can be full of surprises. When a sentence talks about its own truth, it forces us to look at our basic ideas about honesty and correctness. This playful challenge is a fun way to explore how words work and to see that sometimes, even simple sentences can hide big mysteries. Variation 16. What I am saying is a lie. This sentence tells us about all the things the speaker says. It means that every word, every sentence the speaker speaks is a lie. Let's think about this in a very simple way. Imagine someone standing right in front of you and declaring, "What I am saying is a lie." If you try to decide whether that is true, you have to consider what it means. If you believe the speaker and think that everything they say is indeed a lie, then this very sentence must also be a lie. But if it's a lie, that means not everything the speaker says is false, which implies that this sentence might actually be true. And if it's true, then it contradicts its own claim by saying it is a lie. This creates a never-ending circle where you can't settle on whether it's true or false. Think of it like a magic mirror that always shows the opposite of what you expect. When you look into the mirror, you don't see a straightforward image, you see a flipped, reversed picture. What I am saying is a lie works much the same way by flipping the meaning of the words as soon as you try to decide if they are honest or not. Now, imagine you're playing a game with your friends. One friend shouts, "Everything I say is a trick." You'd probably wonder if you should laugh or be serious. Each time you try to decide if you can trust that friend, the idea flips around in your mind. This sentence does the same thing. It forces you to question every word the speaker utters. In normal conversation, we expect clear answers, like a light that is either on or off. But when a sentence talks about itself in this way, it creates a puzzle that does not have a simple answer. It's a playful twist on language that makes you think about what truth really means. Even though the words are simple, they create a loop that keeps switching back and forth, leaving you wondering if you ever really have the answer. This is the charm and mystery of the paradox. Variation 17. This line is false. When you read, "This line is false," you might think it's just a short note, but it hides a tricky puzzle. Here, the word line means a sentence or a message written down. The sentence tells you that the very line you are reading is not true. Now, let's break this down. If you decide that the line is true, then its claim must be correct, but it claims that it is false. So, if it is true, it immediately contradicts itself by saying it is false. On the other hand, if you decide that the line is false, then its statement, "This line is false," is not correct, which means it might actually be true. You end up stuck in a circle that never stops. Imagine a sign on a wall that reads, "This sign is wrong." When you try to decide whether to trust that sign, you quickly become confused. If you believe it, then the sign is wrong. If you disbelieve it, then maybe the sign is correct. This back and forth is just like the puzzle in "This line is false." It makes you question whether the message can ever settle into being just true or just false. Think of it like riding on a spinning merry-go-round where you never know which way you are going. Each time you try to make a decision, the answer flips around on you. This sentence challenges our usual idea that every statement must be clearly one way or the other, true or false. Instead, it creates a loop that turns simple words into a head-scratching mystery. In everyday life, we rely on clear messages to help us understand the world. But when language refers to itself in this playful way, it shows that sometimes words can twist and turn, leaving us with a puzzle that is both fun and perplexing. "This line is false" is a gentle reminder that even the simplest messages can hide a deep, looping riddle about truth. Variation 18, "My next words are untrue." The sentence, "My next words are untrue," is an interesting puzzle because it makes a promise about what comes right after. It tells you that the very next words the speaker says will not be true. Let's walk through this slowly. Imagine a person saying this just before they continue speaking. If you believe the promise, then you expect the following words to be lies. However, if those next words turn out to be lies, then the promise is kept. But here's the catch: if the promise itself is a lie, then perhaps the next words are not lies after all. They could be true. This creates a loop that is hard to break. Think of it like a simple game. Suppose a friend tells you, "Watch this, my next words will be false." You listen carefully, trying to decide whether to trust that statement. If you trust your friend, you brace for a lie. But if you later find out that the next words are honest, then the promise was false. And if the promise was false, maybe the next words are exactly what they said, a lie. This back and forth leaves you uncertain. Imagine a magic coin that sometimes tells the truth and sometimes lies. If the coin announces, "My next flip will be false," you are left wondering how to predict what will come next. This sentence, "My next words are untrue," works in a similar way by challenging you to decide if you can trust what is about to be said. This playful twist teaches us that even a short sentence can create a big puzzle. It forces us to think about the nature of truth and how a simple promise can turn into a looping mystery. In our everyday world, we like things to be clear, but this sentence reminds us that language can sometimes be full of surprises that make our minds work hard to untangle them. Variation 19, "I am speaking falsehood." When you hear, "I am speaking falsehood," the sentence is making a clear declaration. Everything the speaker says is not true. Let's unpack this idea in a simple way. The word falsehood means a lie or something that is not true. So, when the speaker says, "I am speaking falsehood," they are claiming that every word they utter is a lie. But if you decide that this sentence is true, then it must be correct that all their words are lies. But that creates a problem. If the sentence itself is a lie, then it cannot be true. On the other hand, if you decide the sentence is false, then perhaps not every word the speaker says is a lie, and maybe some words are true. This back and forth makes it impossible to decide neatly. Think about a student in class who boldly declares, "I always tell lies." If you believe this, you wonder whether any of their words can be trusted. The sentence, "I am speaking falsehood," works similarly. It forces you to choose between believing and not believing, yet each choice leads you into a contradiction. Imagine a situation where the rules of a game suddenly change every time you try to play. One moment, you think you know the rules, and the next, the rules flip, leaving you confused. This is what happens with this sentence. It creates a loop where every attempt to pin down the truth ends in contradiction. This playful twist shows that language can sometimes be tricky when it talks about itself. We normally expect words to be clear, like a light that is either on or off. But "I am speaking falsehood" is like a light that keeps switching itself on and off. It invites you to think about what it really means to be honest, And it reminds you that even simple statements can hide big puzzles about truth. Variation 20. Every word I say is a lie. This sentence makes a bold and all-encompassing claim. It tells you that every single word the speaker says is a lie. Let's explore what this means in a simple and clear way. If you take this statement at face value, you are being told that nothing the speaker says can be trusted. But if you decide that the sentence is true, then indeed every word the speaker says must be false. But that includes the very sentence you just heard, which would then be false. On the other hand, if you decide that the sentence is false, then it cannot be true that every word is a lie. That means there is at least one word, maybe even many, that are true. This constant flipping between true and false creates a confusing loop that is hard to resolve. Think about a friend who always exaggerates and often jokes by saying, "All my stories are made up." You might laugh, yet you also wonder if any part of what they say holds a bit of truth. Every word I say is a lie works in a similar way by challenging you to trust what you hear. It forces you into a circle. If you believe the speaker, you end up with a contradiction. If you disbelieve them, you might have to admit that some words are true. Imagine playing a board game where the rules keep changing every time you take a turn. No matter how hard you try to follow the rules, you find yourself stuck in a loop. This is what the sentence does. It creates a loop of ideas where your mind spins around trying to decide if it's true or false. This playful puzzle shows us that language can sometimes hide mysteries even in the simplest words. It reminds us that while we often expect clear answers in everyday life, some statements are designed to challenge our basic ideas about truth. In doing so, they invite us to think more deeply about what it really means for something to be true or false. Variation 21. I claim that this sentence is false. This sentence says, I claim that this sentence is false. In other words, the speaker is telling you that the very sentence they just said is not true. Let's work through what that means in everyday language. Imagine a friend who confidently declares, I claim that this sentence is false. If you decide to believe what your friend is saying, that is, if you think the sentence is true, then you must accept that the sentence is false. But wait, if it is false, then the claim made by the sentence is not correct, which suggests that the sentence might actually be true. In simple terms, if you call it true, it must be false. If you call it false, then it could be true. This creates a never-ending loop where you cannot settle on one answer. Think of it like a revolving door at a store. Every time you step in, you're forced to choose whether the door is open or closed, but the door just keeps spinning, never letting you know its true state. Or imagine a seesaw that never stops moving. It goes up and down continuously, so you can't say for sure which end is up. This is exactly what happens with the sentence, I claim that this sentence is false. Because the sentence refers to itself, it creates a puzzle that defies our usual rule that every sentence should be either true or false. Most of the time, when someone makes a statement, you can easily decide if it is right or wrong. But here, the sentence tricks your mind by twisting its own meaning. It's as if the sentence is playing a little game, guess my truth, but know that I never want you to have the right answer. This playful loop shows us that language sometimes can be a bit like a fun riddle. Even simple words can hide a big twist when they talk about themselves. In the end, I claim that this sentence is false reminds us that not every statement fits neatly into being just true or just false. It challenges us to think a little deeper about what truth really means. Variation 22. This sentence is not telling the truth. Consider the sentence. This sentence is not telling the truth. It sounds straightforward, but it quickly becomes puzzling. The sentence tells you that it is not being honest. But if you decide that the sentence is telling the truth, then its claim must be correct, which means the sentence is not telling the truth, a contradiction. On the other hand, if you decide that the sentence is not telling the truth, then its claim that it is not honest is itself untrue, which means the sentence might actually be telling the truth. You're stuck in a loop that flips back and forth. Imagine a note on your locker that reads, "This note is not telling the truth." When you try to decide whether to believe it, you end up confused. If you believe it, then it must be lying, which means you shouldn't believe it after all. It's similar to a friend saying, I'm not serious about anything I say. You start wondering whether you can trust them, and the more you think about it, the more mixed up you get. This sentence shows how simple words can twist our ideas of honesty. It is just as if someone says, "I'm not honest," and you find yourself wondering if they are being honest about that very claim. The magic here is in the self-reference. The sentence talks about itself, and that makes it hard to decide if it's true or not. It's a little like a mirror that reflects itself endlessly, never giving you a clear picture. By playing with words in this way, the sentence teaches us that language isn't always black or white. Sometimes, even a simple sentence like, "This sentence is not telling the truth," can become a fun puzzle that challenges what we usually think about truth. Variation 23. I claim that every word I say is false. Let's look at the sentence. I claim that every word I say is false. This statement goes even further. It doesn't just talk about one sentence but about everything the speaker says. Imagine if a person declared, "Every single word I say is a lie." If you take that at face value, then even the sentence itself must be a lie. But if that sentence is a lie, then at least one word the person says might be true. This creates a big circle of confusion where nothing can be pinned down as definitely true or false. Picture a classmate who boasts, "Every word I say is false." When you hear that, you might laugh and wonder if you should believe anything they say at all. If you try to trust the statement, you run into trouble because it tells you that nothing can be trusted, including itself. It's like trying to solve a puzzle that keeps changing as you look at it. This sentence uses very simple words, but it creates a huge brain teaser. It forces you to question not just one sentence, but every word the speaker has ever said. The moment you try to decide if the sentence is true, you get stuck in a loop. If it's true, then it must be false. If it's false, then it suggests some words might actually be true. This push and pull makes it a classic example of a self-referential paradox. This playful twist reminds us that language can sometimes be like a fun, looping maze. Even when you think you understand the words, they can turn around and surprise you with a hidden puzzle about truth. I claim that every word I say is false challenges our usual way of thinking about honesty and forces us to explore the curious nature of self-reference. Variation 24. All of my statements are false. Now consider the sentence, "All of my statements are false." This means that everything the speaker says, including this sentence, is a lie. Imagine someone in your class who claims, "Everything I say is a lie." If you believe that, then every word they speak must be false. But then, what about the statement, "All of my statements are false"? If that statement is true, then it must be false because it says everything is a lie. Conversely, if you think it is false, then it means that not everything they say is a lie. Maybe some statements are actually true. This creates a circle that's hard to break. It's like trying to decide if a friend who always jokes around is serious or not. One minute you think, "I can't trust any of them," and the next, you wonder if maybe one of their jokes might be true. With the sentence, "All of my statements are false," you find yourself in the same tricky situation. Every time you try to pin it down, you end up flipping back and forth between true and false. Imagine a game where the rules keep changing every time you take a turn. No matter what, you never get a chance to settle on a clear answer. That's the fun and confusing part of this paradox. It shows how even a simple statement can cause big questions about what it means for something to be true. This sentence reminds us that language isn't always as simple as we think. When someone makes a statement about every word they say, it forces you to look closer at how you decide what's true or false. It's a playful puzzle that makes you think twice about trust and honesty in everyday words. Variation 25. I guarantee that this sentence is false. Finally, let's look at the sentence. I guarantee that this sentence is false. The word guarantee makes the claim sound very strong and sure. The speaker promises that the sentence is false. But what happens when you try to trust that promise? If you believe the guarantee, then the sentence must be false. Yet, if the sentence is false, then the guarantee isn't keeping its word, and that means the sentence might be true. Once again, you're caught in a loop. Think about it like this. Imagine a friend who solemnly promises, I guarantee that this sentence is false. You might nod, expecting something clear. However, when you try to decide whether to trust your friend's promise, you find yourself stuck. If you say the promise works and the sentence is false, then it contradicts itself. If you say it doesn't work, then maybe the sentence is true. It's a bit like a magic trick that never reveals its secret. This sentence shows us that even strong words like I guarantee can't save a statement that talks about itself. The promise flips the meaning right back on itself, making it impossible to settle on a clear answer. It's like trying to catch a ball that keeps bouncing away every time you get close. By playing with simple words, I guarantee that this sentence is false, teaches us that language can be full of surprises. Even when a sentence sounds confident and sure, it can hide a puzzle that leaves us wondering about the real nature of truth. This playful twist challenges us to think a bit deeper about honesty and to enjoy the fun of a good riddle. Variation 26, I always lie. When someone says, I always lie, they are claiming that every single thing they say is a lie. Let's break that down step by step in everyday language. Imagine a friend who proudly declares, I always lie. If you take that at face value and believe them, then every word coming out of their mouth must be false. That would include this very statement, I always lie. But here's the twist, if that statement is false, it means that the friend does not always lie, maybe sometimes they speak the truth. Then the original claim can't be right. You end up with a confusing cycle. If it's true, it must be false. And if it's false, then maybe it is true. Think of it like a playground game where someone says, I never win. If you believe that, then the moment they win a game, their statement would be a lie. But if they lose every time, then perhaps the statement is true, but then you have to wonder if that loss is just another trick of words. With I always lie, you face the same puzzle. The statement forces you into a loop that never seems to end. Another way to see it is by imagining a mirror that always shows the opposite of what you expect. When you look at it, you don't get a clear reflection, you get a reversed image that makes you question what's real. I always lie works in a similar fashion. Every time you try to decide if the person is honest, the statement flips your understanding. This paradox shows us that words can sometimes be tricky. We usually expect a statement to be either true or false. But when a sentence talks about the speaker's own behavior in such a broad way, it creates a puzzle that challenges our common sense. Even though the sentence is short and uses simple words, it opens up a big question. What does it really mean to always lie? And if you never tell the truth, can you ever be believed? This playful loop is what makes I always lie a classic example of a self-referential paradox. Variation 27, I never tell the truth. Now consider the sentence, I never tell the truth. It sounds almost the same as I always lie, and it brings up a very similar puzzle. If the person says, I never tell the truth, and you believe them, then that statement must be true. But if it is true, then they really never tell the truth, which means this statement itself is not true, creating a contradiction. On the other hand, if you decide the sentence is false, then it means that they sometimes do tell the truth. In that case, you can't be sure whether to trust what they say, and the statement ends up being a loop with no clear answer. Imagine a classmate who boasts, I never tell the truth. You might laugh and wonder if you should take anything they say seriously. Every time you try to decide if you can believe them, you end up with a question. If they never tell the truth, then what about this very sentence? It becomes like a puzzle that spins round and round in your head. This sentence challenges our usual idea that words are either honest or not. It's like a riddle where the answer keeps changing every time you try to pin it down. I never tell the truth makes you realize that sometimes even simple statements can hide a big mystery about honesty. It pushes you to think about whether it's possible to be completely untruthful, and what that means when you try to understand someone's words. Variation 28, I lie about everything I say. The sentence, I lie about everything I say, is another way to claim total dishonesty. Let's unpack it. If a person says, I lie about everything I say, you are told that each word they speak is a lie. But if you believe this claim, then this very sentence must also be a lie. But if this sentence is a lie, then perhaps not every word they say is false, and maybe some of what they say is actually true. This creates a loop that is just as tricky as the earlier examples. Imagine a storyteller who always exaggerates and then declares, "I lie about everything I say." You might wonder if any of their stories have a kernel of truth. Every time you try to figure out if you can trust their words, the statement forces you into a circle. Believing it means you can't trust anything they say, but not believing it means maybe some words are true. This mix-up makes it hard to decide what's real. This playful contradiction reminds us that when language talks about itself, it can become a puzzle. Even a short sentence like, "I lie about everything I say," makes you question the very nature of truth. It challenges the idea that words have one clear meaning, and it shows that sometimes, words can be as slippery as a well-worn riddle. Variation 29. I speak only falsehoods. Consider the sentence, "I speak only falsehoods." The speaker is claiming that every word they utter is untrue. If you believe that, then every statement they make, including this one, must be false. But if this sentence is false, then it must mean that at least one of their words is true. This creates a loop where your mind can't settle on a clear answer. Think of it like a clock that never tells the right time. Each time you check it, you wonder whether you should trust it or not. I speak only falsehoods works the same way, making you question whether anything said can be taken at face value. Every time you try to decide if the statement is true, you end up back where you started. This kind of twist in words shows us that language can be more than just a way to share information. It can also be a playful puzzle. Even a simple sentence can hide a big question about what truth really means. When a sentence talks about all the words a person speaks, it forces you to re-examine your idea of honesty and to wonder if absolute lies can ever exist without a hint of truth. Variation 30. I cannot speak the truth. Finally, let's explore, I cannot speak the truth. This sentence tells you that the speaker is not able to say anything that is true. If you believe that statement, then it must be true that they cannot speak the truth. But if it's true, then this very sentence is an example of them speaking the truth, which contradicts the claim. On the other hand, if you decide the sentence is false, then it means they can speak the truth sometimes. Again, you are caught in a loop. Imagine a situation where someone says, "I cannot speak the truth," as if they have no choice but to lie. You might think of a character in a story who is cursed never to say anything true. When you hear that, you start wondering, if they truly cannot speak the truth, what about the statement they just made? It creates a cycle of doubt that is hard to resolve. This sentence uses simple words but hides a deep puzzle about what it means to be honest. It challenges our usual ideas by suggesting that even our ability to speak the truth can be in question. I cannot speak the truth reminds us that language can be full of surprises and that sometimes even a small sentence can lead us into a big loop of questions. It's a playful way to explore the nature of truth, leaving us with more questions than answers, and that is exactly what makes these paradoxes so fascinating. Variation 31. I never speak a single true word. When someone says, "I never speak a single true word," they are making a sweeping claim about everything they say. Let's break it down in everyday language. If you take this statement at face value, then every word that comes out of the speaker's mouth must be false. That means even this very sentence, "I never speak a single true word," would have to be false. But if it's false, then at least one word the speaker says must be true. This contradiction creates a loop. If the statement is true, it forces itself to be false, and if it's false, then it shows that sometimes the speaker tells the truth. Imagine a friend who, with a mischievous grin, declares, "I never speak a single true word." First, you might chuckle, thinking it's just a silly exaggeration. However, if you try to decide whether you can believe that claim, you soon find yourself in a puzzling circle. Accepting the claim means every utterance is false, including the claim itself. Rejecting it implies that sometimes, at least one true word slips out. It's like a revolving door that never stops spinning, where every attempt to step through leads you right back to where you started. This twist shows how language can become a riddle when it talks about itself in an absolute way. In our day-to-day conversations, We expect that people sometimes say true things and sometimes lie. But here, the statement challenges that common sense by claiming no word is ever true. It forces us to think about whether a person can actually live by such a rule. The sentence becomes a playful puzzle, inviting you to explore the boundaries of truth and falsehood. Ultimately, "I never speak a single true word" is not just an over-the-top claim. It's a fascinating example of how words can loop back on themselves. It reminds us that sometimes, the simplest sentences can hide deep contradictions and make us question our assumptions about honesty. It's a fun, mind-twisting way to see that language isn't always as clear-cut as we might think. Variation 32. Every sentence that comes out of my mouth is false. Imagine someone confidently stating, "Every sentence that comes out of my mouth is false." This sentence blankets all the words the person speaks with the claim of being untrue. If you believe this statement, then every single sentence they utter must be false, including the very sentence you just heard. But if that sentence is false, it means there is at least one sentence that is true, creating a contradiction that loops back on itself. Think of a classmate who proclaims, "Every sentence that comes out of my mouth is false." First, it might sound like an exaggeration or a joke. However, if you analyze it carefully, you soon notice the puzzle. Accepting the claim as true forces you to label the claim itself as false. Rejecting it, on the other hand, means that at least one sentence is true. This back and forth is like a game of ping pong where the ball keeps bouncing and never settles in one court. This sentence challenges our normal expectation that people sometimes speak truth and sometimes lie. In everyday life, we understand that no one speaks only lies or only truths. The idea that every sentence could be false shakes up that notion and forces us to reconsider the rules we use to judge honesty. It's as if the sentence is daring you to decide whether it can truly work logically. By exploring this statement, we learn that language can twist and turn in unexpected ways. "Every sentence that comes out of my mouth is false" isn't just a boast or a joke. It's a clever play on self-reference that makes us pause and think. It shows that sometimes, simple words can create a maze of logic that is as intriguing as it is confusing. This playful paradox reminds us that truth and falsehood might not always fit neatly into the boxes we expect. Variation 33. Truth never leaves my lips. When someone says, "Truth never leaves my lips," they are claiming that nothing true is ever spoken. Let's explore this idea in simple terms. If you accept this statement, then every word uttered by the speaker must be false. However, if that's the case, then the very claim, "Truth never leaves my lips," must also be false, because it would be a true statement about their dishonesty. This contradiction creates a loop where the statement cannot settle on being true or false. Imagine you're listening to someone who proudly asserts, "Truth never leaves my lips." You might initially find it amusing or even impressive. Yet, when you try to figure out whether to believe them, you quickly become stuck. If every word they speak is false, then their claim itself is false, suggesting that sometimes truth does escape their lips. It's like a seesaw that never stops rocking, always forcing you to change your mind about what is real. This statement turns our usual understanding of honesty on its head. In our daily lives, we expect that even someone who lies a lot might sometimes tell a little truth. But "truth never leaves my lips" boldly denies that possibility, creating a fun but baffling puzzle. It challenges us to consider the very nature of truth and how we judge what is honest. Ultimately, "truth never leaves my lips" serves as a playful reminder that language can be as tricky as it is clear. It pushes us to think about whether a person can ever truly claim to speak nothing but lies. This delightful paradox invites us to explore the deeper questions of honesty and to appreciate that even simple words can lead to big, looping puzzles about what is real. Variation 34. All my words are untrue. Consider the bold claim, "All my words are untrue." This sentence asserts that every single word spoken by the speaker is false. If you take this seriously, then the statement itself must be untrue. But if it's untrue, then at least one word the speaker utters must be true, which contradicts the claim. This creates a cycle that can't be easily resolved. Imagine a person in a conversation declaring, "All my words are untrue." First, you might think it's just a dramatic way to boast about their dishonesty. But if you pause to analyze it, you quickly see the puzzle. Accepting the statement means you believe every word is a lie, including this one. Rejecting it means that some words are true. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where every piece seems to change shape every time you look at it. This paradox forces you to question your assumptions about honesty. In our everyday experiences, we know that people rarely, if ever, speak entirely in lies. There's usually a mix of truth and falsehood in what we say. But when someone claims, "All my words are untrue," it challenges that idea and leads you into a loop of contradiction. The sentence acts like a mirror that reflects back on itself in a never-ending cycle. Every time you try to decide whether the claim is true, you find that it undermines itself. This playful twist shows that language can sometimes hide deep puzzles behind simple words. It reminds us that even straightforward statements can twist into riddles when they try to describe themselves. In the end, "All my words are untrue" is more than a dramatic boast. It's a clever demonstration of how self-reference can create delightful confusion. It teaches us to look closer at the words we use and to be aware that sometimes language can lead us into unexpected loops of logic. Variation 35. I cannot utter a truth. The statement, "I cannot utter a truth," is a striking claim. It tells you that the speaker is incapable of saying anything true at all. Let's break this down in simple, everyday language. If you believe this statement, then every word the speaker speaks must be false. But if that is the case, then the sentence, "I cannot utter a truth," becomes a true example of what they claim they cannot do, which creates a contradiction. In other words, if the sentence is true, it shows that the speaker can speak a truth, and if it is false, then the speaker sometimes does speak the truth. This loop makes the statement a classic paradox. Imagine a character in a story who is cursed never to speak truth. One day, this character says, "I cannot utter a truth." First, it sounds dramatic and mysterious. However, when you try to figure out whether to believe the claim, you quickly realize that accepting it leads to a contradiction. If the statement is true, then it means the character has just spoken a truth, which breaks the rule. If the statement is false, then it means the character can indeed speak truth sometimes. This puzzling loop is like trying to catch a shadow that keeps shifting every time you move. The sentence forces you to think about what it really means to speak the truth. In our everyday life, we expect that even those who lie often mix in a bit of truth. "I cannot utter a truth" takes that idea to an extreme, challenging us to decide whether it can logically work. Ultimately, this sentence is a playful twist on the concept of honesty. It shows that language can be full of surprises. Sometimes, even a simple statement can lead to deep, twisting puzzles about what is real and what is not. It invites you to consider the nature of truth in a fun and engaging way, reminding us that our words can be as tricky as they are clear. Variation 36. Every utterance I make is a lie. When someone says, "Every utterance I make is a lie," they are claiming that not a single thing they say is ever true. Let's break this down in everyday language. First, the word utterance means any word or sentence spoken by the person. So, the claim here is that every single word, every sentence that leaves their mouth is false. Think about what happens if you try to decide whether this statement is true. If you believe the speaker and accept that every utterance they make is a lie, then this very sentence must also be a lie. But if it is a lie, then at least one of the words they speak might be true. That puts you in a tricky situation. If the sentence is true, then it contradicts itself by being false. And if it is false, then perhaps not all utterances are lies. This creates a never-ending circle that doesn't allow you to settle on whether the statement is truly true or false. Imagine a friend who, with a mischievous smile, declares, "Every utterance I make is a lie." First, you might think it's just a funny exaggeration. However, when you try to take it seriously, you see that if everything they say is false, then even that claim is false, which means sometimes they might be telling the truth. It's like watching a clock that spins its hands in circles without ever pointing to the right time. This kind of puzzle shows how words can twist our ideas about truth. We usually expect that sometimes people say things that are true and sometimes things that aren't. But when a sentence tries to cover every word, it creates a loop where truth and falsehood keep switching places. It's a playful riddle that invites you to think about what it means to speak honestly and whether such an extreme claim can ever really work. In the end, every utterance I make is a lie is a clever way of challenging our usual ideas about honesty. It reminds us that language isn't always as clear-cut as we'd like it to be, and sometimes a few simple words can open up a big, looping puzzle about what it means for something to be true. Variation 37. No word I utter is ever true. When someone says, "No word I utter is ever true," they are declaring that not a single word they speak can be trusted. Let's unpack this idea using everyday examples. The phrase, "no word," means that every single word coming from the speaker is false. If you decide to take this claim at face value, then every sentence they form, including this very sentence, must be false. But if this statement is false, then at least one word they utter must be true, which contradicts the claim. This back and forth creates a puzzle that is hard to resolve. Imagine a classmate confidently stating, "No word I utter is ever true." First, you might laugh or shake your head, thinking it's a silly exaggeration. However, when you try to really decide whether you can trust anything they say, you end up stuck in a loop. If every word is untrue, then this claim must be untrue too, meaning some words might be true. But then, that makes the claim unreliable. It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle where some pieces change shape every time you look at them. This statement challenges our normal understanding that people sometimes speak truth and sometimes lie. We usually assume that, even if someone lies a lot, there might be a nugget of truth hidden in their words. But the claim, "No word I utter is ever true," takes that idea to the extreme, making us wonder how any conversation could work if nothing could be trusted. It's a mind twister that turns everyday speech into a loop of confusion. In this way, the sentence reminds us that language can sometimes be a playful puzzle, a game where words hide secrets and twist meanings. Even a simple claim like this one forces us to think hard about what we mean by true and false. It shows us that sometimes our words can be as slippery as soap in water, making us question what we believe. Variation 38. I assure you, every word I speak is false. When a speaker declares, "I assure you, every word I speak is false," they are trying to convince you that nothing they say is ever true. Let's break this down in simple terms. The word assure means they promise or guarantee it, adding extra confidence to the claim. If you trust this promise, then every single word coming from them must be false, including the very sentence you just heard. But if that sentence is false, then at least one word they speak might be true, which makes their promise unreliable. Imagine a storyteller saying, "I assure you, every word I speak is false," with a dramatic tone. First, you might be entertained by the bold claim. Yet, as you try to figure out if you should believe it, you notice the same twist. If every word is false, then the statement itself must be false. This creates a never-ending loop where truth and falsehood keep swapping places. It's like a promise that turns out to be a trick, a magic trick that leaves you both amazed and confused. This puzzle makes you realize that language isn't always as straightforward as we think. We normally expect someone's words to be a mix of truth and lies. But here, the claim takes that idea to an extreme, forcing us to question whether it is possible for someone to speak nothing but falsehoods. It's a playful reminder that sometimes, when words try to describe themselves, they can twist into a loop that challenges our usual way of thinking. In the end, I assure you, every word I speak is false, is more than just a dramatic statement. It's a clever puzzle about trust and honesty. It invites you to think about how you decide if something is true or false, and reminds you that even confident promises can lead to surprising questions about the nature of truth. Variation 39. I speak nothing but fabrications. When someone says, "I speak nothing but fabrications," they are claiming that every word they say is made up or invented, a complete falsehood. Let's explore what this means in everyday language. The term fabrications means stories or statements that are not based on truth. They are created out of nothing real. If you believe this claim, then every sentence that leaves the speaker's mouth must be a lie, including the very claim itself. But if that claim is a lie, then perhaps not all their words are fabrications, and some might be true. This circular reasoning creates a tricky puzzle. Imagine a friend who always tells tall tales suddenly announcing, "I speak nothing but fabrications." First, you might think it's just another one of their jokes. However, when you try to take it seriously, you soon run into a loop. If everything they say is made up, then this statement must also be made up, suggesting that at least one word could be true. That thought leaves you wondering if you can ever trust anything they say. It's like trying to build a tower with blocks that keep changing their shape every time you touch them. This playful twist challenges our everyday ideas about honesty. We know that people often mix truth with a little bit of exaggeration or invention. But the claim, "I speak nothing but fabrications," takes that notion to an extreme, forcing us to question whether it is even possible to live without ever speaking the truth. It turns simple words into a loop of confusion, where believing one part makes you doubt another. Ultimately, this statement is a fun puzzle that reminds us that language can sometimes be as unpredictable as a riddle. It invites you to consider how you decide whether a word is true or a fabrication, and it shows that even simple claims can hide deep, looping puzzles about honesty. Variation 40. My speech is a web of lies. When a person says, "My speech is a web of lies," they are comparing their words to a tangled, intricate net where every thread is a lie. Let's break this down in simple, everyday language. The word web suggests something complex that is woven together. And here it means that all the things the person says are connected in a way that makes it impossible to tell where the truth is. If you believe this statement, then every sentence they speak is a lie, even the claim itself. But if the claim is a lie, then perhaps some parts of their speech are true, which contradicts the idea of a complete web of lies. Imagine watching a magician who says, "My speech is a web of lies." You might be fascinated by the idea that every trick in every word is designed to confuse you. Yet, when you try to decide what to believe, you quickly get caught in the maze of their words. Each sentence pulls you deeper into a puzzle where truth and falsehood are tangled together like strands in a spider's web. You might try to find the one clear thread of truth, only to realize that the entire web shifts and changes. This statement challenges our normal expectations about how we use language. Usually, we trust that people sometimes speak the truth and sometimes lie. But when someone claims that all their speech is nothing but a web of lies, it forces you to question everything they say. It's a playful yet puzzling declaration that turns a simple conversation into a maze of ideas. In the end, "My speech is a web of lies" is a creative way to show that language can be both beautiful and confusing. It reminds us that even simple words can hide a deep puzzle about what is real. This playful twist makes you think about the nature of honesty and shows that sometimes our words can be as tangled as a spider's web, leaving you with more questions than answers. Variation 41. I affirm that every utterance from me is a lie. Imagine a person standing in front of you saying, "I affirm that every utterance from me is a lie." This is a strong claim. When they say every utterance, they mean every single word or sentence that comes from their mouth is false. Now, let's break this down step by step. If you choose to believe this claim, then every word they speak must be untrue, even this very sentence must be a lie. But if that sentence is a lie, then at least one word they say might actually be true. This creates a confusing loop. If you believe it, you must also believe it is false. If you disbelieve it, then the claim might be true. Think of it as a seesaw that never finds balance. Every time you try to decide whether to trust the speaker, the answer flips. Imagine a friend who always jokes around claiming, "I affirm that every utterance from me is a lie." First, it might sound funny, but as you think about it, you realize that if even one word turns out true, the statement itself cannot hold up. It's like trying to catch a shadow that keeps shifting its shape. Every time you think you've caught it, it slips away. This twist in language shows how self-reference, Talking about one's own words can lead to a puzzle that challenges our basic ideas of truth and falsehood. In everyday life, we expect that sometimes people speak honestly and sometimes they do not. But this statement pushes the idea to an extreme, leaving you with a circular problem that never settles. In the end, I affirm that every utterance from me is a lie, is more than a bold claim. It's a playful reminder that language can sometimes twist itself into knots. Even simple sentences can open up a loop of questions about what is true and what is not, making us think twice about how we judge honesty. Variation 42. I vow that everything I say is false. Imagine someone declaring, I vow that everything I say is false. The word vow suggests a promise, a strong assurance. Here, the speaker is promising that every word coming out of their mouth is untrue. If you believe this promise, then every sentence they say, including the promise itself, must be false. But if the promise is false, then maybe not all their words are false, and perhaps some are true. This creates a puzzling circle where truth and falsehood keep swapping places. Think of it like a friend who, with a mischievous grin, everything I say is false. You might initially smile and take it as a joke. Yet, when you pause to consider it, you see that if the statement is true, then the promise must be a lie. And if it's a lie, then part of what they say might be true. It's like a magic trick that never quite reveals its secret, a loop that makes your brain spin as you try to pin down an answer. This sentence forces you to question the very nature of promises and truth. We normally expect that promises are reliable and that our words can be sorted as true or false. But this statement turns that expectation on its head, showing that even a strong vow can lead us into a maze of confusion. In the end, I vow that everything I say is false is a fun yet tricky puzzle. It reminds us that language sometimes behaves like a riddle, challenging us to think about how words work and what they really mean. Even a simple promise can create a loop where truth and falsehood are tangled together, leaving you wondering if any clear answer can be found. Variation 43. I declare that all my speech is deception. Imagine a person confidently stating, I declare that all my speech is deception. With the word declare, the speaker makes a bold announcement about every word they ever speak. If you take that seriously, then every sentence, every single word, must be a lie. But if every word is a lie, then this declaration itself must be false. And if it's false, then some part of their speech might actually be true. This endless loop is hard to untangle. Picture a classmate who, with a dramatic tone, pronounces, I declare that all my speech is deception. First, it sounds like a grand statement, perhaps part of a theatrical act. But when you really think about it, the claim forces you into a contradiction. If every word is a deception, then the claim itself can't be trusted. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep rearranging themselves. This twist in language shows that self-referential statements can be especially puzzling. In daily conversation, we usually know that sometimes people lie and sometimes they speak the truth. Yet, a statement that claims every word is deceptive leaves you in a loop where nothing seems certain. Ultimately, I declare that all my speech is deception is a playful way to challenge our ideas about honesty. It teaches us that language can be as tricky as it is expressive, turning even a bold declaration into a fun, looping riddle about what it means for words to be true or false. Variation 44. I promise that no word I speak is true. Consider a speaker who says, I promise that no word I speak is true. With the word promise, they add a layer of seriousness, as if they're swearing by it. The claim here is that every word coming from their mouth is false. If you believe this, then even the promise itself must be a lie. But if the promise is a lie, then at least one word must be true, and the cycle continues. Imagine a friend who solemnly states, I promise that no word I speak is true. You might laugh at first, thinking it's a funny exaggeration. Yet, as you think more about it, you realize that if every word is false, the statement itself cannot be trusted. It's like a door that keeps closing and opening, never letting you decide if it's secure or not. This playful twist shows how even a simple promise can create a big puzzle when it refers to itself. Our everyday experience tells us that most people mix truths with lies. But here, the claim forces us into a never-ending circle where trusting the statement means doubting it at the same time. In the end, I promise that no word I speak is true challenges our usual understanding of honesty. It reminds us that language can sometimes loop back on itself, creating a maze where truth and falsehood are tangled together. It's a fun, thought-provoking riddle that makes you wonder how we decide what is real and what is just a twist of words. Variation 45. I insist that every sentence I utter is false. Now picture a speaker insisting, I insist that every sentence I utter is false. The word insist adds a forceful tone to the claim, as if the speaker is determined to prove that all their words are lies. When you listen to this, you must consider that if every sentence they utter is false, then even this very sentence must be a lie. But if it's a lie, then some sentence must be true, an endless loop of confusion. Imagine a person in a debate who forcefully declares, I insist that every sentence I utter is false. Their tone might be serious, almost challenging you to find a flaw in their words. However, when you stop to analyze it, you see that if every sentence is indeed false, then the claim itself cannot be trusted. It becomes a circular puzzle where every attempt to decide on truth leads you back to doubt. The statement, like the others, turns our basic idea of truth on its head. We normally expect that people sometimes speak honestly and sometimes they lie. But when a sentence insists that every word is false, it forces you into a logical maze where nothing seems to fit perfectly. In the end, I insist that every sentence I utter is false is a striking example of how language can create a looping riddle. It shows that even the strongest insistence on falsehood leads to a contradiction, leaving you to wonder whether any statement can be completely reliable. This playful twist on words challenges you to think about how you decide what is true and reminds you that sometimes, simple sentences can hide surprisingly deep puzzles about honesty. Variation 46. I state that all I speak is false. Imagine someone saying, I state that all I speak is false. This sentence claims that every single word that comes out of the speaker's mouth is a lie. Let's break this down in plain language. When you hear this, you're being told that nothing the speaker ever says can be trusted. If you decide to take that claim at face value, then every sentence, every single utterance, must be false. That includes the sentence, I state that all I speak is false. But if that sentence is false, then it means that not everything the speaker says is false. In other words, there must be at least one true statement somewhere. This creates a loop where if you believe the sentence, it forces itself to be false, and if you reject it, then part of what the speaker says might actually be true. Think of it like a clock that never points to the right time. Every time you check, you're left wondering whether you can trust it at all. Or imagine a friend who insists, every word I speak is false, with a twinkle in their eye. First, it might seem like an over-the-top joke. But once you try to figure it out, you realize that if every word is indeed a lie, then the statement itself can't be true. This circular reasoning is exactly what makes the sentence so puzzling. This twist in language shows us that when a sentence talks about itself in an all-encompassing way, it forces our brains to work in circles. In everyday life, we know that people sometimes tell the truth and sometimes lie. However, when someone claims that every word they say is false, it challenges that idea and creates a logical maze where you can't easily decide what's real. In the end, I state that all I speak is false is more than just a bold claim. It's a playful riddle that reminds us language isn't always straightforward. It opens up a space where our usual rules of true and false break down, leaving us with a puzzle that loops back on itself. The sentence, with its simple words, makes us pause and wonder about the nature of honesty and the tricky way words can twist themselves into a loop. Variation 47. Not a single word I utter is true. Imagine hearing someone declare, not a single word I utter is true. This statement means that every word they say is false. There isn't one word that comes out of their mouth that you can count on. Let's break it down. If you believe this claim, then every sentence they speak must be a lie, including the very statement you just heard. But if that sentence is a lie, then at least one word they utter must be true. This creates a contradiction that loops around. If every word is false, then the statement itself must be false, suggesting that some words might indeed be true. Consider a friend who loves to exaggerate and one day proclaims, "Not a single word I utter is true." First, it might sound like they're just teasing, but as you think about it, you see that if you accept it, then even their teasing statement falls apart. It's like trying to build a puzzle where one piece always refuses to fit. No matter how hard you try, the picture never becomes clear. This kind of statement challenges our everyday expectations. In normal conversation, we assume that people mix truth with a bit of fibbing. Yet, when someone claims that not a single word is true, it forces you into a logical loop where you can't decide if any statement is reliable. It's as if their words are caught in a web where truth and falsehood are tangled together. Ultimately, "Not a single word I utter is true" serves as a playful reminder that language can twist back on itself. It invites you to think about how you decide what to believe and shows that sometimes, even simple sentences can hide a deep puzzle about honesty. This statement leaves you wondering how much trust you should place in words that claim nothing is ever true. Variation 48. I assert that every sentence I say is a lie. Imagine a person confidently stating, "I assert that every sentence I say is a lie." The speaker is making a strong claim about every sentence they form. In plain terms, if you accept this claim, then every sentence, without exception, must be false. That includes the sentence, "I assert that every sentence I say is a lie." But if that sentence is false, then not every sentence can be a lie. At least one sentence must be true. This leads to a circular problem. Believing the claim forces you to conclude it's false, while rejecting it implies that some sentences might be true. Picture a classmate in a lively discussion who boldly declares, "I assert that every sentence I say is a lie." First, you might smile and think it's just another quirky remark. But as you analyze it, the puzzle becomes clear. If everything they say is a lie, then this very statement cannot be trusted. It's like a dance where every step undoes the last, leaving you spinning without a clear rhythm. This paradox forces us to rethink how we usually separate truth from falsehood. We expect that people, even if they lie sometimes, will also speak a bit of truth. But when someone claims every sentence is a lie, it creates a loop that doesn't let you settle on any clear answer. It's a delightful mental maze that shows how language can sometimes play tricks on our understanding. In the end, "I assert that every sentence I say is a lie" is a fun, mind-twisting riddle that reminds us that simple statements can hide big puzzles. It challenges our everyday notions of honesty and forces us to ask, what does it really mean to lie? This playful twist on words makes you pause and think, leaving you both puzzled and amused by the curious nature of language. Variation 49. I guarantee that all of my statements are untrue. Imagine someone solemnly declaring, "I guarantee that all of my statements are untrue." The word guarantee adds a strong promise to the claim. In simple terms, the speaker is promising that every statement they make is a lie. If you believe this guarantee, then every sentence they utter must be false, even this very sentence. But if this sentence is false, then the guarantee itself cannot be trusted, implying that at least one statement might be true. This creates a loop where the promise undermines itself. Think of it like a friend who always exaggerates, suddenly assuring you, "I guarantee that all of my statements are untrue." First, you might be amused by the bold promise. But as you try to decide whether to take it seriously, you realize the same problem arises. If every statement is false, then the guarantee is false, and vice versa. It's like a bridge that collapses every time you try to cross it, a puzzle that leaves you wondering how you can ever get a straight answer. This statement challenges our everyday ideas about promises and honesty. We usually trust that even if someone lies sometimes, not every word is a lie. But this claim pushes that idea to the extreme, creating a loop that is hard to untangle. It shows us that language, when it talks about itself, can turn into a fun and perplexing riddle. In the end, "I guarantee that all of my statements are untrue" is more than just a dramatic declaration. It's a playful reminder that language can be a maze where truth and falsehood twist together. This statement invites you to question how you decide what is real and what is not, leaving you with a delightful puzzle that makes you think twice about the promises words can make. Variation 50. I declare that none of my words holds any truth. Imagine hearing someone say, I declare that none of my words holds any truth. With the word declare, the speaker makes a strong announcement about every word they say. In plain language, the claim means that not a single word they utter is true. If you choose to believe this, then every statement, including the declaration itself, must be false. But if that declaration is false, then at least one word the speaker says must carry some truth. This creates a circular puzzle. If every word is untrue, the statement contradicts itself, and if it's false, then some words might be true. Picture a person in a debate or a storyteller on stage proclaiming, I declare that none of my words holds any truth. First, the bold claim might grab your attention. However, when you pause to think about it, you find yourself caught in a loop. Accepting the claim means you must believe that even this strong declaration is false. Rejecting it implies that there is some truth in what they say. It's like a spiral that keeps drawing you back to the start, leaving you with no clear answer. This statement pushes us to reconsider what we mean by truth and lies. In everyday conversation, we assume that people mix a bit of truth with their fibs. But when someone claims that none of their words holds any truth, it challenges that assumption and forces us into a tricky maze of logic. The simple sentence, with its clear words, ends up creating a puzzle that twists our normal ideas about honesty. Ultimately, I declare that none of my words holds any truth, serves as a playful yet profound riddle. It reminds us that even simple declarations can hide deep contradictions and challenge our understanding of what it means for something to be true or false. This twist in language invites you to pause and consider the curious nature of honesty and the surprising ways words can turn our expectations upside down. Variation 51. I proclaim that every statement I make is a complete lie. When someone says, I proclaim that every statement I make is a complete lie, they are making a bold claim about everything they say. Let's break it down in everyday terms. The speaker is insisting that every sentence, every remark, and every word they speak is entirely false. But if you take that claim at face value, then every statement they utter must be untrue, even the very sentence in which they proclaim this idea. But here's the twist. If that statement is untrue, then there must be at least one statement that is actually true. This creates a cycle where, if you believe the claim, it forces itself into contradiction, and if you disbelieve it, then part of what they say may be true. Think about it this way. Suppose someone you know always exaggerates, and one day they confidently announce, I proclaim that every statement I make is a complete lie. You might chuckle at the dramatic flair, yet as you try to figure it out, you see that if every word they say is false, then this proclamation cannot be trusted. It's like having a rule that every time you speak, you break your own promise. This makes it difficult to decide if you should believe anything they say because even their bold claim ends up canceling itself out. This puzzling loop forces you to reconsider how words work. In most conversations, we expect people to sometimes tell the truth and sometimes stretch the truth a little. But when someone claims that every single statement is a complete lie, it pushes us into a maze of ideas where truth and falsehood swap places before our eyes. It leaves you wondering, can anyone really speak nothing but lies? And if they did, would that not make the very act of saying it a contradiction? Ultimately, this variation is not just a clever twist of words, it's a playful challenge to our everyday ideas about honesty. It reminds us that language can sometimes be as tangled as a knot in a piece of string. Even simple, confident statements can hide an endless loop of questions about what is real. This paradox encourages you to think about the nature of truth and how, sometimes, even the strongest proclamations can be part of a never-ending puzzle. Variation 52. My every utterance is a fabrication. When a person declares, my every utterance is a fabrication, they mean that everything they say is made up or invented, not based on reality. Let's look at this in simple terms. By using the word fabrication, the speaker suggests that each word they speak is crafted without any basis in truth. If you accept this claim, then every sentence, even the claim itself, must be false. Yet, if that claim is false, then it implies that at least one utterance might be true. This self-defeating loop makes it impossible to pin down whether any of the speaker's words can be trusted. Consider a situation where someone known for tall tales suddenly states, "My every utterance is a fabrication." In normal conversation, you might expect a mix of truth and exaggeration. But here, the claim is absolute. Nothing they say holds any truth. When you try to reconcile this, you quickly fall into a contradiction. If every word is a fabrication, then this very statement must be fabricated too, which means there is a possibility that some words are not fabrications. This endless back and forth creates a puzzle that is both amusing and frustrating. This statement challenges our everyday understanding that even the most imaginative storytellers sometimes speak honestly. It turns the idea of trust on its head and forces you to think, can someone really live without uttering a single true word? The claim becomes a riddle that loops around continuously, making you wonder how you decide what to believe. In the end, "My every utterance is a fabrication" serves as a playful reminder that language can be tricky. It shows that even simple words, when used to describe themselves, can lead us into circles of thought. The statement invites you to reflect on how you judge honesty and challenges the idea that a person's words must fit neatly into the categories of true or false. Variation 53. All I say is merely made up. When a speaker announces, "All I say is merely made up," they claim that nothing they speak has any basis in fact. The phrase, "merely made up," suggests that every sentence is a product of imagination rather than reality. But if you take that statement at face value, then every word the speaker utters, including this one, should be considered untrue. However, if that statement is untrue, then some of what they say might actually be real. This creates a loop where accepting the claim forces you into a contradiction, while rejecting it implies there is truth hidden in their words. Picture a person who loves to tell fantastical stories and then declares, "All I say is merely made up." First, you might assume it's just a playful exaggeration. But when you really consider it, you find yourself questioning every word they speak. If every statement is made up, then this particular statement must also be made up, meaning that perhaps not everything they say is made up after all. This cycle can leave you wondering if any conversation with them could ever be taken seriously. The beauty of this paradox is that it challenges our normal expectations about communication. In everyday life, we understand that even people who invent stories often slip in truths. The claim, "All I say is merely made up," turns this expectation on its head, forcing you to confront a riddle where the line between truth and fiction blurs. It becomes a playful puzzle, a verbal trick that makes you think about how you decide what is real. Ultimately, this statement reminds us that language is not always as straightforward as it seems. Even a simple declaration can lead to a maze of contradictions that challenge our ideas of honesty. It's a gentle invitation to question our assumptions about words and the stories we tell. Variation 54. Every word that leaves my mouth is untrue. When someone states, "Every word that leaves my mouth is untrue," they are making a sweeping declaration about the honesty of all they say. In everyday language, this means that without exception, nothing they say can be trusted. If you accept that statement, then every sentence, even this one, must be false. But if this sentence is false, then it means that at least one word they speak might actually be true, creating a loop that is hard to untangle. Consider a scenario where a person, known for their quirky sense of humor, declares, "Every word that leaves my mouth is untrue." You might first smile at the exaggeration, but then you start to think about what it really means. If everything they say is untrue, then this very declaration contradicts itself. The moment you try to pin down whether you can trust any of their words, you end up back at the starting point, unsure if any word can be labeled as true. This statement challenges the idea that people have a mix of truth and falsehood in their speech. It pushes you to reconsider how you judge honesty in everyday conversation. The notion that every word could be untrue feels extreme, and when you work through the logic, you're left with a puzzle that loops around endlessly. In the end, every word that leaves my mouth is untrue is a playful and perplexing riddle that shows just how tricky language can be. It invites you to question whether anyone can really be that extreme in their dishonesty. By mixing everyday speech with a self-referential twist, the statement turns a simple idea into a mind-bending puzzle about the nature of truth and trust. Variation 55. I maintain that everything I say is a falsehood. When a speaker declares, I maintain that everything I say is a falsehood, they are firmly stating that every single word they utter is untrue. Breaking this down, the word maintain suggests a strong, ongoing belief in this claim. According to the statement, every sentence, even this very declaration, must be false. But if this declaration is false, then it contradicts itself because it implies that at least one sentence could be true. This creates a continuous loop where the statement undermines its own certainty. Consider a scenario in a lively discussion where someone insists, I maintain that everything I say is a falsehood. First, the statement might sound like a dramatic quip, but as you think more about it, the logical puzzle becomes clear. If you accept the claim, then even the claim itself must be false, which means not everything they say is a falsehood. On the flip side, if you reject the claim, then some of their statements might indeed be true. This back and forth creates a loop that is hard to resolve. This paradox challenges the usual way we see communication. We generally expect that even if a person lies often, they sometimes speak the truth. However, the claim that everything said is a falsehood leaves no room for truth, which immediately leads to a contradiction. It forces you to question how we can label statements as true or false when they refer to themselves. Ultimately, I maintain that everything I say is a falsehood serves as a thought-provoking riddle. It reminds us that language can twist and turn in unexpected ways, turning a simple claim into a looping puzzle. This playful paradox encourages us to think more deeply about what honesty means and how our words can sometimes trap us in a maze of contradictions. Variation 56. I assert that each word I utter is a lie. When someone says, I assert that each word I utter is a lie, they make a bold claim about the honesty of everything they say. In simple terms, they mean every single word that comes out of their mouth is false. If you take this statement at face value, then even the very sentence declaring this must be a lie. But if that sentence is a lie, then there is at least one word that might be true, creating a loop that contradicts itself. Let's break it down. In everyday conversations, we know that people sometimes tell the truth and sometimes exaggerate. However, saying that every word is a lie leaves no room for any honesty. When you try to decide if you should trust such a claim, you find yourself caught in a circular argument. If every word is false, then the declaration, I assert that each word I utter is a lie, can't be true, which in turn means that maybe some words are true. This endless cycle makes it impossible to settle on whether the statement is correct. Consider how this might work in a real-life chat. A friend known for playful remarks might declare, I assert that each word I utter is a lie. You might smile at the dramatic statement, but as you think about it, you realize that if every word is false, then this bold claim cannot be trusted. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces change their shape every time you look at them. This twist shows us that when language talks about itself, it can twist logic into loops. Even a seemingly simple sentence can force you to re-examine your ideas about truth and falsehood. It's a playful challenge that reminds us how complex words can be, even when they seem straightforward. Ultimately, I assert that each word I utter is a lie, is more than just a quirky statement. It opens up a conversation about the nature of honesty and shows that sometimes our words can create puzzles that loop back on themselves in unexpected ways. Variation 57. Without exception, every word I speak is false. When a person declares, without exception, every word I speak is false, they are claiming that every sentence they form is a lie, no ifs, ands, or buts. In plain language, if you believe this claim, then even this very sentence must be false. But if that is false, it implies that at least one word they say is true. This self-contradiction creates a loop where the statement undermines itself. In our everyday interactions, we understand that people rarely speak only lies. Usually, there is a mix of truth and falsehood. The idea that without exception every word is false is extreme and hard to swallow. When you try to reason it out, you see that if every word is indeed false, then the claim itself cannot be trusted, because it would mean a true statement is being presented as a lie. This forces you into a puzzle where your normal way of judging honesty just doesn't work. Think about a classmate who proclaims, "Without exception, every word I speak is false." First, you might laugh it off as an exaggeration. However, when you start to analyze the statement, you quickly run into trouble. The moment you accept the claim, you must also conclude that this very claim is false, thereby opening the door for at least one true word. This extreme claim pushes us to think more carefully about the nature of truth and how we decide what to believe. It shows that sometimes language can challenge our everyday expectations by creating an endless loop of logic that is both amusing and perplexing. Variation 58. Every remark I make is a lie. When someone says, "Every remark I make is a lie," they mean that every single comment or sentence they say is untrue. If you take that at face value, then even the statement, "Every remark I make is a lie," should be a lie. Yet, if that statement is false, it means at least one remark is true. This creates a puzzling loop that makes it hard to pin down the truth. In everyday life, most people mix truths with little exaggerations or mistakes. The claim that every remark is a lie leaves no room for anything honest, and when you try to assess it, you end up in a cycle. Accepting the statement forces you to reject it, while rejecting it implies there might be some truth. It's a bit like a conversation that never settles, where every answer leads to a new question. Consider a scenario during a lively discussion where someone boldly states, "Every remark I make is a lie." Even if you find it humorous at first, as you try to figure out what to believe, you discover that the statement undermines itself. It becomes a verbal loop that leaves you wondering if you can ever trust any word from the speaker. This twist challenges our usual ideas about communication. It invites us to reflect on how even simple statements can spiral into complex puzzles, blurring the lines between truth and falsehood. Ultimately, the claim forces you to think, is it even possible for someone to lie about everything they say? Variation 59. I insist that every word I say is untrue. When someone insists, "I insist that every word I say is untrue," they are making a forceful claim that all their spoken words are false. In everyday language, this means you should not trust anything they say. If you do, then even this insistence must be a lie. And if that's a lie, then at least one word they speak might be true, creating a contradiction. It's a claim that challenges our usual expectations about honesty. In normal conversation, we know that even if someone lies frequently, they rarely lie about every single word. The extreme nature of this statement forces you into a logical circle. If every word is untrue, then this declaration is untrue, suggesting some truth must exist in their speech. Picture a scenario during a casual conversation when a person firmly states, "I insist that every word I say is untrue." Their tone might be serious, pushing you to question everything they say. But as you think about it, you realize that this very insistence creates a loop. The more you analyze it, the more you see that the claim undermines itself, making it impossible to decide if it's wholly accurate. This playful twist in language highlights the complex ways self-referential statements work. It reminds us that language can sometimes create puzzles that challenge our simple ideas of truth and lies. In the end, I insist that every word I say is untrue serves as a fascinating riddle, inviting us to look closer at how we understand honesty. Variation 60. I guarantee that not a single word I say is true. When a speaker promises, "I guarantee that not a single word I say is true," they are making a strong assurance that everything they utter is false. In plain language, this means every sentence they speak must be a lie, even the promise itself. However, if that promise is a lie, then it implies that at least one word could be true, and the whole statement collapses into contradiction. In everyday conversation, we accept that people often mix truth with lies. The idea that not a single word is true is an extreme claim that challenges our normal expectations. As you try to understand the promise, you quickly see the inherent paradox. If every word is false, then the guarantee itself is false, allowing for the possibility that some words might be true. Consider a person known for dramatic statements who says, "I guarantee that not a single word I say is true." First, the strong promise might catch your attention, but upon closer reflection, the contradiction becomes clear. The promise creates a loop. Trusting it forces you to reject it, while rejecting it leaves open the possibility of some truth in their speech. This declaration pushes us to think about how we judge honesty and how self-referential language can lead to unexpected puzzles. It challenges the idea that we can neatly separate truth from falsehood and shows that even the most confident guarantees can twist into a maze of logic. Ultimately, "I guarantee that not a single word I say is true" is a playful yet perplexing statement that invites us to question our assumptions about trust. It serves as a reminder that language, with all its simplicity, can sometimes lead us into deep and delightful loops of thought. Variation 61. I swear that every word I utter is false. When someone declares, "I swear that every word I utter is false," they make a bold promise about the honesty of everything they say. In everyday language, this means that not a single word they speak can be trusted. If we take that claim seriously, then even this very statement must be false. But if the statement is false, it suggests that there is at least one word, maybe even a whole sentence, that is actually true. This creates a tricky loop where the act of swearing that every word is false ends up contradicting itself. Let's break it down. When you hear the promise, "I swear that every word I utter is false," you're being told that the speaker's language is completely unreliable. In normal conversation, people mix truth and mistakes. However, claiming absolute falsehood is an extreme idea. When you try to apply that rule to the promise itself, you quickly see the problem. If every word is false, then this promise is a lie, which means that maybe some words are true. On the flip side, if even one word is true, the claim of total dishonesty collapses. This circular reasoning creates a puzzle that challenges our everyday sense of honesty. It's like a rule in a game that says, "Every move you make is illegal." Once you follow that rule, you find that the rule itself cannot be valid, since following it would require a legal move. Such a statement forces us to question whether it's even possible for someone to lie about every single thing they say. The paradox shows us that when language tries to cover itself in an absolute blanket, it quickly becomes tangled. The playful nature of this paradox reminds us that words can twist back on themselves in surprising ways. Even a firm oath like "I swear" cannot save the logic when it refers to every single utterance. Instead, it opens up a maze of thought where truth and falsehood keep swapping places. Ultimately, this claim invites us to reconsider how we judge honesty and suggests that perhaps no one can truly commit to lying about everything they say. Variation 62. Not one word I speak is ever true. When a person states, "Not one word I speak is ever true," they assert that every word from their mouth is a lie. In simple terms, this means there isn't a single sentence that holds any truth. If you accept this claim, then even the very sentence making the claim must be false. But if that is false, it implies that at least one word might be true, creating an endless loop. Consider how this idea works in a regular conversation. In everyday life, we expect that people usually mix truth with occasional fibs. But saying, "Not one word I speak is ever true," pushes that notion to the extreme. As soon as you try to check the statement against itself, you run into trouble. If every word is false, then the statement itself becomes untrue, suggesting that maybe a word or two can be true. This leaves you caught in a circular argument where every conclusion seems to undo itself. This claim challenges our usual methods for deciding what to believe. It's like having a rule that says, "Every answer you give is wrong." Once you try to answer that rule, you find that it cannot consistently work. The statement makes you question whether absolute dishonesty is even possible and shows that self-referential claims can lead to a confusing loop of ideas. By forcing us to examine the nature of truth, the sentence, "Not one word I speak is ever true," invites us to think deeply about the limits of honesty. It reminds us that language, even when it sounds straightforward, can twist into paradoxes that defy simple classification as true or false. The statement becomes a playful puzzle that encourages us to explore the complex dance between truth and lies. Variation 63. Every statement I make is entirely untrue. When someone says, "Every statement I make is entirely untrue," they claim that every sentence they utter is a complete lie. In everyday terms, this means none of their statements can be trusted, including the statement itself. If you believe that every statement is untrue, then this particular claim must also be untrue. Yet if it is untrue, then some statement must be true, which contradicts the original claim. In a normal conversation, people often mix honesty with exaggeration or mistakes. But saying that every single statement is entirely untrue leaves no room for any truth at all. Once you try to apply that rule to the claim itself, you end up in a circle. Accepting the claim forces you to conclude that the statement must be false, and rejecting it implies that there is at least one true statement. This creates an endless loop of reasoning where the truth cannot settle. This paradox challenges our common expectations about communication. It's like declaring, "Everything I do is wrong." When you think it through, the very act of making that declaration contradicts the rule. The idea pushes you to consider whether someone can truly be incapable of telling the truth, and whether language can handle such an absolute claim without falling apart. The statement, "Every statement I make is entirely untrue," thus becomes a fascinating riddle. It shows that when words talk about themselves in an all-encompassing way, they create a puzzle that forces us to re-examine what we mean by true and false. Ultimately, this claim encourages us to look more closely at how we understand honesty in everyday life. Variation 64. I assure you that every sentence I say is a lie. When a speaker says, "I assure you that every sentence I say is a lie," they are offering a strong guarantee about the falsehood of their words. In plain language, this means that every single sentence from the speaker is meant to be untrue. However, if you trust this assurance, then the sentence itself must be a lie. And if it is a lie, then there must be some truth hidden within their speech, leading you into a loop of contradictions. In everyday interactions, we expect that people sometimes tell the truth, even if they are known for exaggeration or mischief. This claim, however, pushes that expectation to its extreme. The very act of assuring you that every sentence is a lie causes the statement to conflict with itself. If every sentence is false, then the assurance cannot be true, which means that at least one sentence might be true after all. This logical twist forces us to think about the nature of promises and honesty. When someone uses words like, "I assure you," we naturally expect reliability. But when the promise applies to every sentence they speak, it undermines itself and creates a puzzling loop that is hard to resolve. The statement challenges us to reconsider our definitions of truth and falsehood. Ultimately, "I assure you that every sentence I say is a lie" becomes a playful riddle, a reminder that language can sometimes be as slippery as it is clear. It invites us to question how we determine what is true and what is false, and shows that even a confident assurance can lead to unexpected contradictions. Variation 65. I declare without exception that all I say is false. When a speaker proclaims, "I declare without exception that all I say is false," they make a sweeping claim about their entire speech. In everyday language, this means that every single word, with no exceptions, is false. The challenge comes when you try to accept this claim. If every word is indeed false, then the declaration itself must also be false. And if that declaration is false, then it implies that at least one word is true, which contradicts the initial claim. This statement takes an all-or-nothing approach to honesty. In regular conversation, we understand that people may lie sometimes but not always. Saying "all I say is false" pushes that idea to its extreme. When you try to apply the claim to itself, you quickly see that it creates a circular problem. Accepting the claim forces it to be false, while rejecting it suggests that some words may be true. Such a declaration makes you rethink how you decide what to believe. It's like setting up a rule that leaves no room for any truth, and then finding that rule collapses under its own weight. The statement challenges our basic understanding of communication and honesty by showing that an absolute claim about falsehood inevitably leads to a contradiction. In the end, I declare without exception that all I say is false serves as a thought-provoking puzzle. It demonstrates that when language attempts to cover every word with a single label, it can end up creating a loop where truth and falsehood are indistinguishable. This playful twist on words reminds us that sometimes our expectations about honesty need a closer look, and that even the simplest declarations can turn into deep, looping puzzles about the nature of truth. Variation 66. I state unequivocally that every word I utter is false. When someone says, I state unequivocally that every word I utter is false, they are making an absolute claim about all their speech. In everyday terms, this means that every sentence, every word that comes out of their mouth has no truth at all. Normally, we know that even if a person exaggerates or lies sometimes, there is usually a mix of honest and false words. But here, the speaker pushes the idea to an extreme. There isn't a single true word. Let's break it down. If we accept this claim, then every utterance, including this very sentence, must be false. However, if that sentence is false, then it suggests that at least one word might be true, which directly contradicts the original claim. This circular reasoning forces us into a loop. If every word is false, then this declaration must be false. If it's false, then some word is true. This endless cycle challenges our usual way of thinking about truth in conversation. Consider a scenario where someone confidently makes this claim in a discussion. Their tone might be serious, as they insist that nothing they say can be trusted. But as you think it over, you quickly see the problem. The moment you label every word as false, the claim itself becomes untrustworthy. It's a bit like trying to follow a rule that says every rule you state is broken. Once you follow it, the rule itself falls apart. This twist highlights how self-referential statements can create a maze of contradictions. In everyday life, we expect a mix of honesty and error, not an all-or-nothing approach. The statement, I state unequivocally that every word I utter is false, serves as a playful riddle that reminds us that language sometimes loops back on itself in unexpected ways. Ultimately, this paradox invites us to reflect on the nature of truth and the limits of absolute statements. It shows that even simple words can hide deep puzzles when they try to define themselves completely. The playful contradiction in this sentence challenges us to think twice about how we decide what to believe. Variation 67. I claim with certainty that none of my utterances is true. When a speaker says, I claim with certainty that none of my utterances is true, they assert that every single word they speak is entirely false. In everyday language, this means no matter what they say, be it a simple remark or a detailed story, there is not a shred of truth in it. Let's consider the implications. If you accept this claim, then every sentence the speaker utters, including the statement itself, must be false. Yet if that statement is false, it implies that at least one utterance is true. This contradiction forces you into a never-ending loop of logic, where believing the claim means rejecting it at the same time. In our usual conversations, we understand that even if someone is prone to lying, there is almost always a kernel of truth somewhere in their speech. But claiming with certainty that nothing said is true pushes this idea to its extreme. It forces us to re-examine how we judge honesty and to recognize that an absolute claim about falsehood leaves no room for any reliable information. This self-referential claim acts like a verbal maze where every turn leads back to the same confusing crossroads. It challenges our assumptions about communication and highlights how language can sometimes twist logic into endless cycles. Ultimately, I claim with certainty that none of my utterances is true is not merely a dramatic statement. It's a playful yet perplexing riddle. It encourages us to question the nature of truth and to acknowledge that even simple language can hide complex puzzles. In doing so, it serves as a reminder that our everyday way of distinguishing between truth and falsehood may not always be as clear as we think. Variation 68. I insist that all of my speech is completely deceptive. When someone insists, I insist that all of my speech is completely deceptive, they are asserting that everything they say is designed to mislead. In plain language, this means there is no honest word in any of their speech. To unpack this, consider that if every sentence is deceptive, then even the declaration itself must be deceptive. But if that declaration is deceptive, then it might not be wholly false, suggesting that some parts of their speech could be true. This creates a loop where accepting the claim forces you into a contradiction, while rejecting it implies that not every word is deceptive. We normally expect that even those known for deception may occasionally tell the truth. However, a claim like all of my speech is completely deceptive leaves no room for any honesty. Evaluating such a statement quickly leads you into a cycle. If every word is deceptive, the claim itself falls apart because it too would be deceptive. This paradox challenges our everyday experience with language. It highlights that when words refer to themselves in an all-encompassing way, they can generate a tangled web of contradictions. The claim forces us to think deeply about what we mean by deception and whether it is even possible to be entirely deceptive. Ultimately, I insist that all of my speech is completely deceptive stands as a fascinating puzzle that invites reflection on the nature of truth and lies. It shows that even a bold, seemingly clear statement can loop back on itself, leaving us with more questions than answers about the honesty of language. Variation 69. I contend that every single word I speak is a falsehood. When someone says, I contend that every single word I speak is a falsehood, they are making a sweeping statement about the veracity of their language. In everyday conversation, this means that not one word they utter is true. However, if you accept this claim, then the very statement, every single word I speak is a falsehood, must itself be false. If it's false, then at least one word is true, which contradicts the claim. In a typical discussion, we assume that even habitual liars mix in some truth now and then. Yet, this statement pushes that idea to an absolute extreme, leaving no space for any honest word. Once you start evaluating the claim, you quickly become entangled in a logical loop. Accepting it forces you to reject it, and rejecting it suggests that some words might indeed be true. This self-referential twist exposes the complexities of language. It challenges the idea that statements can be neatly labeled as true or false without running into contradictions. The assertion, I contend that every single word I speak is a falsehood, acts as a verbal paradox that compels you to question how any form of communication can be entirely dishonest. Ultimately, this claim is a thought-provoking riddle that encourages us to look more closely at our assumptions about truth. It reminds us that language is a powerful tool, capable of creating puzzles that challenge our understanding of honesty. The paradox leaves us wondering if absolute falsehood is even a possible state for language. Variation 70. I guarantee that every uttered word is nothing but a lie. When a person says, I guarantee that every uttered word is nothing but a lie, they are offering a strong promise that every sentence they speak is entirely false. In simple terms, if you trust this guarantee, then every single word they utter, including this guarantee, must be false. If that guarantee is false, then there must be at least one word that is true, which leads to a contradiction. We typically accept that people sometimes lie and sometimes tell the truth. A guarantee is meant to build trust, so using it to claim that nothing said is true creates a particularly intriguing puzzle. This statement forces you to question, can any promise about utterances remain consistent if it undermines itself? Evaluating the claim brings you into a loop. If every word is a lie, then this promise is also a lie, implying that some words might indeed carry truth. The result is a self-defeating assertion that challenges our everyday understanding of communication. It becomes a verbal labyrinth where every attempt to sort truth from falsehood leads back to the same point of confusion. This paradox illustrates how language can twist back on itself when making absolute statements about honesty. Even a confident guarantee like this one cannot escape the inherent contradiction of self-reference. It invites us to reconsider how we judge the reliability of words and whether any statement can truly be all lies. In the end, I guarantee that every uttered word is nothing but a lie, is more than just a dramatic claim. It's a playful and perplexing riddle that makes you think about the very nature of truth in language. It challenges us to explore the fine line between truth and deception, leaving us with a delightful puzzle that blurs the boundaries of honesty in our everyday conversations. Variation 71. I maintain that every word I speak is false. When someone says, I maintain that every word I speak is false, they are making an extreme claim about their own speech. In simple terms, they are saying that nothing they ever say can be trusted because it is all false. If you try to take this statement at face value, you run into a tricky problem. Let's break it down. If every word the speaker says is false, then even the sentence, I maintain that every word I speak is false, must itself be false. But if that sentence is false, it implies that at least one word they say is actually true. This creates a loop where the statement contradicts itself. Think about it like a never-ending circle. Imagine a friend who boldly declares, I maintain that every word I speak is false. First, you might laugh and assume it's just a joke. However, when you think about it more carefully, you see the puzzle. If every word is false, then the very claim they just made must be untrue, which means some words might be true. It's like a rule that says, everything I do is wrong. If you follow that rule, then even the rule itself can't be right. This kind of paradox challenges our everyday ideas about honesty. We normally expect people to mix a bit of truth with exaggeration or mistakes. No one is completely dishonest in every utterance. When someone tries to claim absolute falsehood in every word, it forces us to question whether such an extreme state is even possible. The self-referential nature of the statement means it turns on itself like a fun little riddle. In the end, I maintain that every word I speak is false isn't just a wild claim. It's a playful puzzle that shows how language can twist in on itself. It reminds us that when words talk about themselves, they can create loops that make it hard to decide what's really true or false. This paradox encourages us to think about honesty in a new way, challenging the idea that everything must fit neatly into the category of true or false. Variation 72. Every sentence I utter is false. When a speaker asserts, every sentence I utter is false, they are claiming that each and every sentence they speak contains no truth. In everyday language, that means no matter what they say, it's all untrue. But here's the catch. If you accept this statement, then even the sentence that makes this claim must be false. And if that sentence is false, then at least one sentence might be true. This creates a circular puzzle where the claim undermines itself. Consider a situation where someone in a conversation states, every sentence I utter is false. You might initially think it's an exaggeration. However, when you stop to analyze it, you realize that if every sentence is false, then this declaration itself cannot be trusted. It's as if the rules of normal conversation no longer apply. In daily life, we expect that even a person who lies a lot sometimes tells the truth. But this extreme claim forces you to ask, is it even possible for every sentence to be a lie? This twist is like a merry-go-round that never stops spinning. Every time you try to decide whether the statement is true, you end up right back where you started, stuck in an endless loop of contradiction. The idea challenges our usual ways of judging honesty and forces us to rethink how language works when it refers to itself. Ultimately, every sentence I utter is false serves as a fascinating brain teaser. It reminds us that language isn't always as simple as true or false, and that sometimes a statement about itself can lead to a fun, perplexing riddle. It's a playful challenge that makes you pause and consider just how complicated the nature of truth can be. Variation 73. I declare that no word I speak is true. When someone proclaims, I declare that no word I speak is true, they are stating that not a single word out of their mouth holds any truth. In everyday terms, this means every statement they make is a lie. If you believe this declaration, then even the very sentence you just heard must be untrue. But if that sentence is untrue, then some words must actually be true, contradicting the claim. Picture a person in a friendly chat saying, "I declare that no word I speak is true." First, you might think they're being dramatic or sarcastic. But if you examine the logic, you see the dilemma. The moment you accept that nothing they say is true, this declaration itself becomes a lie, suggesting that maybe some part of their speech does carry truth. It's a loop that challenges our common sense. This kind of statement is a fun example of how language can twist itself. In our everyday experience, even people who lie often mix in a little honesty. The bold claim that not one word is true leaves no room for any genuine expression. And when you try to fit that into our understanding of normal speech, it leads to confusion. In the end, "I declare that no word I speak is true" is more than just a bold statement. It's a playful paradox that makes you think. It shows that absolute statements about truth can lead to unexpected puzzles. It invites you to reconsider what you believe about honesty and how words work, reminding you that sometimes, even the simplest sentences can hide a big, looping riddle. Variation 74. I insist that all my words are untrue. When someone insists, "I insist that all my words are untrue," they are making a strong claim that every word they speak is false. In plain language, this means you shouldn't trust any of what they say because it's all a lie. However, if you accept this claim, then even this insistence must be false. And if that is false, then it means some words might actually be true, which contradicts the very claim. Think about a person during a casual conversation who says, "I insist that all my words are untrue." First, it might sound like a quirky exaggeration, but when you pause to reflect, you see the inherent contradiction. If everything they say is a lie, then this statement itself can't be trusted because it would have to be false. That means there could be at least one true word among all their speech. This self-referential twist creates a logical loop, a fun little puzzle that forces you to re-examine your ideas about honesty. In everyday life, we expect that people often mix truth with a bit of exaggeration or error. A claim that every word is untrue challenges that expectation and leads you into a circle where truth and falsehood seem to swap places. In the end, "I insist that all my words are untrue" is a fascinating example of how language can loop back on itself. It invites you to think about the nature of truth in a new way and reminds you that even simple statements can lead to big puzzles. This playful paradox makes you wonder if absolute dishonesty is even possible and challenges your everyday assumptions about honesty. Variation 75. I state categorically that every utterance from me is a falsehood. When someone says, "I state categorically that every utterance from me is a falsehood," they are making an all-encompassing claim about their speech. In everyday terms, this means that nothing they say, every single word or sentence, is true. But if you accept this claim, then even this very statement must be a falsehood. But if it's false, then it implies that there is at least one utterance that is true, leading to a contradiction. Consider a scenario where a person, with a serious tone, declares, "I state categorically that every utterance from me is a falsehood." The use of the word categorically is meant to leave no room for doubt. Yet, when you try to apply the claim to itself, you find that it creates a loop. Accepting the claim means you must conclude that the statement itself is false, which in turn suggests that some words might be true. This back and forth creates a puzzle that is hard to resolve. In everyday conversations, we know that even someone prone to lying may sometimes speak a little truth. The extreme nature of this claim challenges that notion, forcing you to question whether anyone can be completely dishonest in every utterance. It's a playful paradox that shows how self-reference in language can twist logic into a never-ending cycle. Ultimately, "I state categorically that every utterance from me is a falsehood" is not just a dramatic claim, it's a thought-provoking riddle. It reminds us that language, even in its simplest form, can hide deep puzzles about truth and honesty. This playful twist encourages you to look more closely at what you assume about statements and to appreciate that sometimes words can lead us into unexpected loops of logic. Variation 76. I proclaim that every word I say is untrue. When someone says, I proclaim that every word I say is untrue. They are making a strong claim about all their speech. In simple terms, this means that nothing they say can be trusted because it is all false. But if you take this claim seriously, then even the sentence in which they proclaim this must itself be untrue. But if that sentence is untrue, it implies that at least one word or sentence might actually be true. This creates a loop where the very act of proclaiming complete untruth ends up contradicting itself. Think of it like a rule in a game that says, everything you do is wrong. If you follow that rule, then even the rule itself must be wrong, which means some actions must be right. In the same way, if every word is untrue, then the statement, every word I say is untrue, can't be trusted. It challenges our normal expectation that even someone who lies a lot might sometimes speak a little truth. When you hear this statement in a conversation, you might wonder how anyone could live by such an extreme rule. After all, in everyday life, people usually mix honest words with exaggerations or mistakes. The idea that every single word is false pushes us into a puzzle. If you believe the claim, then you must also believe that the claim itself is false, which then means not all words are untrue. This endless back and forth is what makes the paradox so interesting. This playful contradiction shows that language can twist back on itself. The sentence forces you to stop and think about how words work and whether absolute statements about truth are even possible. It reminds us that while we like to divide things into true or false, sometimes the truth can get caught in a loop that doesn't let us choose one or the other. The paradox invites us to question our assumptions about honesty and to see that even simple declarations can hide big puzzles. Variation 77. I assert with full confidence that all my statements are lies. When someone says, I assert with full confidence that all my statements are lies, they are claiming that every single sentence they speak is untrue. In everyday language, this means that not one of the things they say holds any truth. If you take this claim at face value, then even the statement, all my statements are lies, must be a lie itself. But if that statement is a lie, it suggests that at least one statement might be true, creating a self-defeating circle. This claim forces you to rethink how you decide what is honest and what is not. In normal conversations, we accept that even a habitual liar might occasionally tell the truth. Yet, here the speaker is pushing the idea to an extreme. No statement they make can be trusted. Once you try to apply this idea to the statement itself, you find yourself stuck in a loop. Accepting the claim means rejecting it, and rejecting it implies that there is some truth. Consider how you might react if a friend said, I assert with full confidence that all my statements are lies. First, it might seem like a dramatic exaggeration. However, once you examine it, you realize that if every word is false, then this strong assertion must also be false, which means some words are true. The constant flip between truth and falsehood makes it a fun but puzzling idea. This paradox shows us that language can be more complicated than it appears. It challenges our basic idea that statements are either true or false. In this case, the claim loops around and leaves us with more questions than answers about the nature of truth in conversation. Variation 78. I declare that no statement of mine holds any truth. When a speaker says, I declare that no statement of mine holds any truth, they are boldly claiming that not a single thing they say is true. In simple terms, if you listen carefully, this means every sentence or remark they make is a lie. But here's where it gets puzzling. If every statement is false, then the very declaration that no statement holds any truth must be false. And if that declaration is false, then it must be that at least one statement is true. This self-referential twist forces you to think about how words work. Normally, we expect that even people who lie a lot mix in some truth now and then. The claim that not one of their statements holds any truth pushes that idea to the extreme, leaving you with a circular problem. Accepting the declaration means the statement itself cannot be trusted, while rejecting it implies that there is some truth. In everyday life, we rarely see someone who is completely dishonest in every word. Even if a person often lies, there's usually a hint of truth here and there. The declaration, no statement of mine holds any truth, removes that possibility, creating a paradox. It's like saying, everything I do is wrong, which leaves you wondering if the rule applies to itself. This playful contradiction is a reminder that language can twist into puzzles when it talks about itself. It shows us that sometimes our simple ideas about truth and falsehood might not cover all the complexities of what is said. The paradox invites you to explore the boundaries of honesty and to appreciate that even the simplest declarations can lead to deep questions about truth. Variation 79. I insist that each sentence I speak is a fabrication. When someone insists, I insist that each sentence I speak is a fabrication, they claim that every sentence they utter is completely made up and not based on reality. In plain language, this means nothing they say is real or true. But if you consider the claim carefully, you soon hit a snag. If every sentence is a fabrication, then the sentence in which they insist on this must also be a fabrication, that is, a lie. Yet if it's a lie, then at least one sentence might actually be true. This contradiction creates a logical loop. In everyday conversation, we expect people to mix facts with exaggerations or even mistakes. However, a claim like each sentence I speak is a fabrication takes that idea to an extreme level. It forces you to wonder if it's even possible for someone to lie about every single thing they say. Once you try to analyze the statement, you find yourself in a circle. Accepting the claim makes it self-defeating, while rejecting it implies some truth exists. The statement challenges our normal way of judging words. We naturally assume that even those who stretch the truth now and then might occasionally speak honestly. Yet, this insistence on complete fabrication leaves no room for that possibility. It becomes a playful puzzle, a twist of language that makes you question the very idea of absolute falsehood. Ultimately, I insist that each sentence I speak is a fabrication, is a thought-provoking riddle. It reminds us that while language is often simple and straightforward, it can also create loops that challenge our understanding of honesty. This paradox encourages us to think about how we determine what is true and how even bold claims can sometimes unravel themselves. Variation 80. I contend that every utterance I make is completely false. When a speaker declares, I contend that every utterance I make is completely false, they are arguing that everything they say is a lie. In everyday terms, this means no matter what words come out of their mouth, none of them hold any truth. However, if you accept this claim, then the very utterance of this sentence must also be false. And if it's false, that implies that at least one utterance might be true, creating a contradiction. This kind of statement pushes the idea of total dishonesty to its limit. In our day-to-day interactions, we know that even people who lie a lot often mix in some truth. The claim that every single utterance is completely false leaves no wiggle room for that small truth. When you try to evaluate the claim, you quickly find yourself caught in a loop. If every utterance is false, then this claim is false. If it's false, then some utterance must be true. Such a paradox challenges our basic assumptions about communication. It makes you pause and think about whether it's even possible for someone to live without ever speaking a true word. The self-referential nature of the statement shows that when language talks about itself in absolute terms, it can lead to an endless cycle of contradiction. In the end, I contend that every utterance I make is completely false, is more than just a dramatic claim. It serves as a playful riddle that reminds us how complicated truth can be. Even a simple sentence can twist into a loop that challenges our clear-cut ideas of honesty. This paradox invites you to explore the fine line between truth and falsehood in everyday language, leaving you with a curious puzzle to ponder. Variation 81. I declare that all I say is entirely untrue. When someone says, I declare that all I say is entirely untrue, they are making a bold claim that every single word they speak carries no truth. In simple terms, this means that nothing they say can be trusted because it is all false. Now, let's think it through step by step. If you take this claim at face value, then even the sentence, all I say is entirely untrue, must be untrue. But if that sentence is untrue, then it means that at least one thing the speaker says is true. This creates a loop. If every word is untrue, then the declaration itself must be a lie. And if it's a lie, then some words might be true. Consider how this works in a normal conversation. Suppose a classmate boldly states, "I declare that all I say is entirely untrue." First, you might laugh or shrug it off as a joke. But when you pause and think about it, you realize that if every word they speak is false, then the very statement they just made contradicts itself. It's similar to saying, "Everything I do is wrong." If that were true, then even the act of saying it would be wrong, which means some actions might actually be right. This self-referential claim challenges our usual understanding of honesty. In everyday life, people often mix truth with mistakes or exaggeration. No one is completely dishonest in every word. Yet, the idea of declaring absolute untruth forces you into a puzzling circle. Accepting the claim means you must reject it, while rejecting it implies that some words are true. The statement, "All I say is entirely untrue," becomes a riddle that has no clear resolution. In the end, this variation reminds us that language can be tricky, especially when it talks about itself. Even simple declarations can twist into loops that challenge our common ideas of truth and lies. The playful paradox encourages you to think about whether absolute statements about honesty can ever really work. It's a fun, mind-bending puzzle that shows how even bold proclamations might not fit neatly into the categories of true or false. Variation 82. I swear that every sentence I utter is a lie. When a person says, "I swear that every sentence I utter is a lie," they promise that nothing they say is true. The word swear gives their claim a strong, serious tone. If you believe them, then every sentence coming from their mouth must be false, even the sentence in which they make this promise. But if that promise is false, then it means at least one sentence might be true, creating a loop that challenges logic. Let's break it down. In everyday language, we know that people sometimes lie and sometimes tell the truth. However, saying every sentence I utter is a lie pushes that idea to an extreme. If you try to apply this rule to the promise itself, you end up with a contradiction. The promise would have to be a lie, implying that not every sentence is a lie. This circular reasoning forces you into a puzzling loop. Picture a friend who, with serious eyes, declares, "I swear that every sentence I utter is a lie." Initially, you might think they're trying to be funny, but when you really consider the logic, you find yourself stuck. If every sentence is false, then this very promise cannot be true. And if it isn't true, then there must be some truth in what they say. This back and forth makes it hard to decide what to believe. This paradox teaches us that absolute statements about honesty can twist into puzzles. It challenges our everyday belief that even habitual liars sometimes say something true. In the end, I swear that every sentence I utter is a lie is a playful riddle, a reminder that language, especially when it refers to itself, can be full of unexpected twists. Variation 83. I claim that not a single word I speak is true. When someone claims, "Not a single word I speak is true," they are saying that everything they say is false. In simple terms, if you listen carefully, every word that comes out of their mouth must be a lie. However, if you accept this claim, then the very sentence, "Not a single word I speak is true," must also be false. And if that sentence is false, it means at least one word they speak is true. This creates a contradiction that leaves you in a loop. In everyday conversation, we understand that even people who lie a lot might slip in a true statement here and there. But when a person insists that every word they say is false, it forces you to reconsider how language works. Imagine someone in class saying, "Not a single word I speak is true." First, it sounds dramatic, but thinking it over, you realize that if it were true, the statement itself would break the rule. This self-referential twist makes it difficult to decide whether to trust anything the speaker says. The claim challenges our idea of honesty by suggesting that absolute falsehood is possible. Yet, as soon as you apply it to the claim itself, you're stuck in a circular argument. This paradox is a fun reminder that language can sometimes create puzzles that do not have a clear answer. Ultimately, "Not a single word I speak is true" is more than a bold claim. It's a playful challenge to our usual understanding of truth. It shows that even simple statements about honesty can become tangled in their own logic, leaving us to wonder if anyone can really speak nothing but lies. Variation 84. I insist that every utterance I make is false. When someone insists, I insist that every utterance I make is false, they are stating firmly that nothing they say is true. In everyday language, this means every word, every sentence, and every remark they offer is a lie. If you take this claim at face value, then even the sentence stating it must be false. But if that is false, then some of what they say must be true. This self-contradiction puts you in a loop. Let's consider it in simpler terms. In daily conversation, most people sometimes tell the truth and sometimes lie. Yet, insisting that every single utterance is false is an extreme idea. If you believe it, then the statement itself must be untrue, which suggests that at least one utterance is true. This creates a logical cycle that makes it hard to decide what to believe. Picture a scenario in which a person in a friendly discussion declares, I insist that every utterance I make is false. Their tone may be serious, and you might initially find it surprising. But as you think about the logic behind it, you notice that if every utterance is false, then the very act of insisting makes the claim contradictory. This paradox invites you to reflect on the nature of truth in our everyday language. It challenges the simple idea that every sentence can be neatly labeled as either true or false. The statement, I insist that every utterance I make is false, becomes a playful puzzle, a reminder that language can loop back on itself in unexpected ways. Variation 85. I assert that every statement I make is a complete fabrication. When a speaker says, I assert that every statement I make is a complete fabrication, they claim that everything they say is entirely made up. In plain language, this means no statement they utter is based on truth. However, if you believe this claim, then even the statement, every statement I make is a complete fabrication, must be a fabrication itself, that is, false. If that statement is false, then some statements must hold a bit of truth, which contradicts the claim. In everyday life, we know that even those who are known for lying occasionally mix truth with lies. The idea of declaring that every statement is a complete fabrication is an extreme position. Once you try to analyze it, you see that the claim causes a logical loop. If everything is a fabrication, then this very claim must be fabricated too, meaning there is room for truth. Consider a person during a casual conversation saying, I assert that every statement I make is a complete fabrication. You might initially think it's just a dramatic way to express skepticism about what they say. But when you examine the logic, you realize that if every statement were indeed fabricated, then this statement itself could not be true. That contradiction makes the claim impossible to accept without questioning its own validity. This paradox shows how self-referential statements can twist our ideas about honesty. It challenges our assumption that language is always clear-cut. I assert that every statement I make is a complete fabrication, becomes a puzzle that forces you to think about whether someone can truly lie about everything they say. In doing so, it invites you to reconsider what it means for words to be true or false, leaving you with a playful yet perplexing riddle about the nature of communication. Variation 86. I can say nothing that is true. When someone states, I can say nothing that is true, they claim that every word they speak is false. In everyday language, this means that no matter what they say, it never reflects reality. But if you take this claim seriously, then even the sentence, I can say nothing that is true, must be false. But if that sentence is false, it implies that there is at least one statement they can make that is true, contradicting their original claim. In our daily conversations, we know that people often mix truths with lies, even if they're known for being dishonest. Yet, this extreme statement leaves no room for any honest word. It forces you into a logical loop. If every word is false, then the claim itself is false, which means something might actually be true. That circular reasoning creates a puzzle where the more you try to decide what is true or false, the deeper the contradiction becomes. Consider how this idea might play out in real life. If a person walked into class and declared, I can say nothing that is true, you'd likely scratch your head. You'd wonder, can someone really speak entirely falsehoods? The moment you try to believe their statement, You end up back where you started. The claim itself can't be trusted. This paradox challenges our normal expectations about honesty. It reminds us that absolute statements about truth are tricky because they tend to collapse under their own weight. The idea behind, "I can say nothing that is true," is a playful puzzle that makes you question whether any claim about absolute dishonesty can hold up without contradiction. Ultimately, this variation serves as a fun, mind-bending riddle. It shows that when language refers to itself, even simple statements can lead to complex problems. It encourages you to think about how we decide what is true and whether it's possible for someone to speak nothing but lies. It's a reminder that our everyday ideas about honesty might not always fit neatly into the boxes of true or false. Variation 87. I assert that not a word I say is ever true. When a speaker declares, "I assert that not a word I say is ever true," they are making a sweeping claim about their entire speech, that every single word is a lie. In everyday terms, if you believe this statement, then even the sentence stating it must be false. But if that sentence is false, then at least one word must be true, which creates a clear contradiction. Normally, we accept that people might lie sometimes, but we rarely think that every single word they speak is false. If you try to take the claim literally, you run into a circular problem. The moment you agree that not a word is ever true, the very act of making that claim proves otherwise, since the claim itself becomes untrue. This contradiction leaves you stuck in a loop where the idea of complete dishonesty can't be maintained logically. Picture someone in a conversation declaring this extreme statement. You might laugh at the exaggeration at first, but then you start to wonder, if absolutely nothing they say is true, then what about the statement itself? This self-referential twist forces you to rethink how you judge honesty and truth in everyday language. Ultimately, "I assert that not a word I say is ever true" challenges our usual ideas about communication. It shows that absolute claims about dishonesty lead to a cycle of contradictions. This playful paradox reminds you that language can sometimes trap itself in a loop, making it difficult to decide what to believe. Variation 88. I claim that all my speech is pure deception. When a person says, "I claim that all my speech is pure deception," they are taking an extreme stance by insisting that every sentence they speak is entirely made up. In simple language, this means no matter what they say, it's nothing but deception. Yet if you believe this claim, then even the sentence, "all my speech is pure deception," must be a deception itself. But if that statement is deceptive, then some of what they say might actually be true, which contradicts their claim. In everyday life, we know that even people known for deceiving others might occasionally speak a truth. The statement, however, leaves no room for truth at all. Once you try to apply the claim to itself, you end up in a loop where accepting it makes it false and rejecting it implies some truth exists. This paradox forces you to examine the limits of language. It asks whether it's ever possible for someone to completely avoid the truth. By claiming that every word is pure deception, the statement collapses into its own contradiction, leaving you to wonder if such an absolute stance can ever be maintained. In the end, "I claim that all my speech is pure deception" serves as a fascinating puzzle. It highlights how self-referential statements can twist into endless loops of contradiction. This riddle encourages you to think about the nature of truth and deception in our everyday conversations, revealing that language is not always as straightforward as it seems. Variation 89. I maintain that every word I utter is a fabrication. When someone says, "I maintain that every word I utter is a fabrication," they are asserting that every statement they make is completely made up. In plain language, the fabrication is something invented rather than based on fact. If you take this claim seriously, then every word, including the claim itself, must be false. But if the statement is false, it implies that there must be at least one true utterance, which contradicts the idea of total fabrication. In everyday conversation, we know that even habitual liars sometimes mix in a bit of truth. This extreme claim leaves no space for that possibility, forcing you into a logical loop. If every word is a fabrication, then the very declaration of that fact must also be fabricated, creating a contradiction that is hard to resolve. This self-referential paradox challenges our basic assumptions about language. It shows that when someone makes an all-encompassing claim about their dishonesty, the statement itself becomes impossible to hold up under scrutiny. You're left wondering if absolute fabrication is even possible. In essence, I maintain that every word I utter is a fabrication, becomes a thought-provoking riddle that plays with our ideas of truth and falsehood. It invites you to consider how language works and whether any claim about complete falsehood can ever be consistent. The puzzle encourages a deeper look into what it means for a statement to be entirely made up, reminding us that language can often be more complicated than it appears. Variation 90. I insist that all my spoken words are nothing but falsehoods. When a person declares, I insist that all my spoken words are nothing but falsehoods, they are making a strong, absolute claim about the veracity of everything they say. In simple terms, this means every sentence they utter is a lie. If you accept this claim, then even the sentence stating it must be false. But if that sentence is false, then at least one word they speak must be true, which creates a clear contradiction. In everyday life, while we know that people may lie sometimes, we don't usually believe that every word they say is false. This extreme claim forces you to confront a logical loop. If every word is a falsehood, then the claim itself cannot hold true, because it would then be an example of a true statement. This self-referential twist makes you question whether it is possible to maintain such absolute dishonesty. It's like trying to follow a rule that says everything you do is wrong, and then realizing that the rule itself breaks down. The statement, all my spoken words are nothing but falsehoods, challenges our usual ideas about honesty and communication, as it traps itself in a never-ending cycle of contradiction. Ultimately, this variation serves as a playful and perplexing riddle about the nature of truth. It shows how language can twist in on itself when making all-encompassing claims about honesty, inviting you to rethink what it means to speak truthfully. This paradox leaves you with a curious puzzle that blurs the clear line between truth and falsehood in our everyday conversations. Variation 91. I guarantee that every statement I utter is a lie. When someone says, I guarantee that every statement I utter is a lie, they are making a bold promise that nothing they say is ever true. In everyday language, this means that every sentence that comes out of their mouth is false. If you take this claim at face value, then even the sentence, I guarantee that every statement I utter is a lie, must be false. But if that sentence is false, then at least one statement they make must be true. This creates a loop. The promise itself undermines its own truth. Let's break it down step by step. In our normal conversations, we know that people sometimes tell the truth and sometimes lie. However, this claim pushes the idea to an extreme. By guaranteeing that every statement is a lie, the speaker is saying there is no exception. When you apply that rule to the guarantee itself, it causes a contradiction. If the guarantee is a lie, then there is at least one true statement, which means the guarantee doesn't hold. Think of it as a rule in a game that says, every move you make is illegal. When you try to follow that rule, you quickly find that the rule itself can't be applied consistently. Similarly, if you believe that every word is false, you are forced to accept that even the guarantee is false. This twist makes it impossible to decide whether any statement can be trusted. This self-referential loop shows us that when language talks about itself in an absolute way, it can create puzzles that don't have a neat answer. The idea behind this variation is both dramatic and thought-provoking. It challenges our everyday understanding of honesty. Can anyone really live by a rule that says nothing they say is true? The paradox invites us to reflect on how we judge words and promises. In the end, I guarantee that every statement I utter is a lie, is a playful yet perplexing riddle. It reminds us that language can twist back on itself in surprising ways, forcing us to reconsider our simple ideas about truth and falsehood. Variation 92. I insist that none of my words is ever true. When a person declares, I insist that none of my words is ever true, they claim that not a single word they speak can be trusted. In plain language, this means every word is a lie. If you accept this claim, then the very sentence that makes the claim must also be false. And if that sentence is false, then at least one word must be true, creating a clear contradiction. In everyday life, we understand that even people known for lying occasionally mix in some truth. This extreme assertion forces you into a loop. For instance, if someone insists that none of their words is true, you are led to wonder how any communication could work at all. The claim becomes self-defeating. If every word is false, then the claim itself is false, which in turn means some words might actually be true. This paradox challenges our normal expectations. We usually accept that people may not be completely honest all the time, but the idea that not one word is ever true is too extreme to hold logically. The statement forces us to re-examine our ideas about trust and honesty. In doing so, it creates a verbal maze where your initial reaction, to take the statement at face value, collides with the contradiction built into the claim itself. Ultimately, I insist that none of my words is ever true is a striking example of how absolute statements about truth can lead to a never-ending loop of contradiction. It makes you think twice about whether such an extreme claim could ever be maintained in real life, and it invites you to explore the fine line between truth and falsehood in everyday language. Variation 93. I maintain that every word I say is completely false. When someone says, I maintain that every word I say is completely false, they are asserting an all-out claim that no statement they utter has any truth. In simple terms, this means every word, even the claim itself, is false. If the claim is false, then it must mean that at least one word is true, which contradicts the original assertion. In day-to-day conversations, we know that even habitual liars often mix in a grain of truth. But this statement pushes the idea to its extreme. It leaves no room for any honest word. Once you try to apply the rule to itself, you run into a problem. If every word is false, then the declaration, every word I say is completely false, must be false as well. That, in turn, means some word might be true, breaking the total claim. This circular reasoning is what makes the paradox so puzzling. It challenges the simple binary we tend to use, true or false, and shows that sometimes a statement referring to itself can defy a clear classification. The claim, I maintain that every word I say is completely false, forces us to consider whether absolute dishonesty is even possible. In the end, this variation is a playful riddle about the nature of truth. It invites you to reflect on how we understand language and whether any statement can truly be all lies. It's a reminder that when words talk about themselves, they can create unexpected loops that challenge our common sense. Variation 94. I assert that every sentence I speak is fabricated. When a person asserts, I assert that every sentence I speak is fabricated, they are claiming that everything they say is made up, with no basis in fact. In everyday language, fabricated means invented or not real. If you take this claim seriously, then every sentence, including the very one making the claim, must be a fabrication. But if that sentence is fabricated, i.e., false, then it implies that at least one sentence might not be fabricated, which creates a contradiction. In a normal conversation, we expect a blend of truth and exaggeration. Few people would dare claim that every sentence they utter is entirely made up. Yet, when someone makes this absolute claim, it forces you into a loop. Accepting the statement means you must also accept that the claim itself is false. And if the claim is false, then some of what they say might actually be true. This self-referential twist highlights the challenge of making absolute statements about one's own words. It's like setting a rule that leaves no room for any exceptions, and then realizing the rule itself can't hold up under scrutiny. The statement, I assert that every sentence I speak is fabricated, becomes a puzzle that forces you to rethink your understanding of honesty and fiction. Ultimately, this variation serves as a thought-provoking riddle. It shows how language can twist into a loop when it tries to describe itself too completely. The paradox encourages you to explore the fine line between truth and invention in everyday speech, reminding you that even bold claims can hide contradictions. Variation 95. I contend that nothing I say is ever correct. When a speaker declares, I contend that nothing I say is ever correct. They are making a strong claim that every word they speak is wrong. In simple language, this means that no matter what they say, it is never accurate. However, if you accept this claim, then the very sentence stating it must also be wrong. But if that sentence is wrong, then it implies that at least one statement might be correct, leading to a contradiction. In our everyday interactions, we know that even people who often make mistakes sometimes say something right. The claim, "Nothing I say is ever correct," is so extreme that it leaves no room for any truth. When you apply this rule to the claim itself, you find yourself in a loop. If every statement is wrong, then this claim must be wrong too, which means some statements might be right. This self-referential paradox challenges the way we usually think about accuracy and error. It forces you to question whether it is even possible for someone to be completely wrong in everything they say. The statement becomes a riddle, an endless cycle where truth and falsehood keep switching places. Ultimately, I contend that nothing I say is ever correct is a playful yet perplexing challenge to our understanding of honesty and accuracy. It invites you to reflect on the nature of mistakes and whether absolute error can exist without any exceptions. This paradox is a reminder that language, even when used in simple terms, can create deep puzzles that make us rethink our everyday assumptions about what is true or false. Variation 96. I declare that every phrase I speak is a lie. When someone says, "I declare that every phrase I speak is a lie," they are making a sweeping claim about all their speech. In simple terms, they mean that not a single group of words they say can be trusted because every phrase is false. But if you accept this claim, then even the very sentence in which they make this declaration must be a lie. But if that sentence is a lie, it means that at least one of the phrases they speak might be true, which contradicts the original claim. Let's break this down. In everyday conversation, we know that people can mix truth with exaggeration or even mistakes. Yet, when someone insists that every phrase is a lie, they push this idea to an extreme. Imagine a classmate announcing, "I declare that every phrase I speak is a lie." First, it might sound like a dramatic joke, but when you really think about it, you realize the statement contradicts itself. If every phrase is false, then the declaration itself cannot be true. This kind of self-reference creates a circular puzzle. If you accept the claim, you must also conclude that the declaration is false, which then implies that some phrase may be true. In other words, the more you try to pin down the truth of the statement, the more it unravels. It's like setting a rule that every rule you state is broken, and then discovering that the rule itself can't stand. Ultimately, I declare that every phrase I speak is a lie challenges our normal ideas about honesty and language. It invites us to think about whether it's even possible for someone to speak entirely in falsehoods. This playful paradox shows that when language talks about itself, it can twist into an endless loop of contradiction, a riddle with no simple answer. Variation 97. I maintain that none of my uttered words is ever true. In saying, "I maintain that none of my uttered words is ever true," the speaker asserts that every word they say is false. In everyday language, this means that if you listen closely, you will find not one reliable or honest word among their speech. Yet, if you accept this claim, then even the very sentence making the claim must be false. And if that sentence is false, then at least one word they say is true, contradicting the claim. Consider how this might sound in a real conversation. Imagine someone insisting during a discussion, "I maintain that none of my uttered words is ever true." First, you might think it's just an exaggerated way of saying they lie a lot. But when you analyze the logic, the statement forces you into a circular problem. If every uttered word is false, then the claim itself is untrue, meaning some words must be true. This self-referential loop highlights the complexity of absolute statements. In everyday life, even a habitual liar might accidentally speak the truth sometimes. The claim, "None of my uttered words is ever true," leaves no room for that possibility, and that creates a logical contradiction. Every time you try to decide if the statement holds, you end up with a puzzle that keeps flipping back on itself. Ultimately, This variation challenges our understanding of language and honesty. It asks whether it is even possible to live by such an extreme rule. The paradox reminds us that absolute claims about truth and falsehood often collapse under their own weight, leaving us with an endless cycle of questions. Variation 98. I assert that every word I say is a fabrication. When a speaker asserts, every word I say is a fabrication, they are claiming that all their words are completely made up. In everyday terms, a fabrication is something invented rather than based on fact. If you accept this assertion, then even the sentence stating it must be a fabrication. However, if that sentence is a fabrication, false, then it means at least one word might be true, contradicting the claim. Imagine someone in a conversation declaring, every word I say is a fabrication. First, you might smile, thinking it's just a quirky way to describe their storytelling. Yet when you analyze it logically, the statement creates a loop. If every word is indeed fabricated, then the declaration itself would also be fabricated, implying some words are not fabrications after all. This self-referential twist challenges our usual belief that even people who invent stories sometimes tell a bit of truth. It forces you to consider whether it is possible for someone to speak nothing but falsehoods. As you try to resolve the contradiction, you end up in a cycle. Accepting the claim makes it false, and rejecting it suggests there is truth in some words. Ultimately, I assert that every word I say is a fabrication, serves as a playful riddle about the nature of language and honesty. It reminds us that absolute statements often lead to contradictions and encourages us to think about the fine line between truth and invention in our everyday speech. Variation 99. I insist that all my expressions are false. When a person insists, all my expressions are false, they are stating that every way they communicate, every expression, every sentence, is untrue. In simple language, this means nothing they express can be trusted because it's all a lie. Yet, if you accept this claim, then even the statement itself must be false. And if that statement is false, then at least one expression must be true, which creates a contradiction. Think about a scenario where someone in a discussion confidently declares, I insist that all my expressions are false. Initially, it might sound like a dramatic way to say they are always lying. But when you break down the logic, you find that the claim loops back on itself. If every expression is false, then the declaration must also be false, implying that some expressions might carry truth. This paradox challenges our everyday expectations. We know that people might exaggerate or lie, but rarely do they speak without any truth at all. The idea that every expression is false forces you to consider the limits of honesty. The contradiction in the statement leaves you with an endless loop of reasoning, where the more you try to pin down the truth, the more it eludes you. In the end, I insist that all my expressions are false, is a playful yet perplexing riddle about language. It shows that when words refer to themselves in absolute terms, they can twist into puzzles that are hard to resolve. The paradox invites us to think about whether it's ever possible to speak entirely in falsehoods and reminds us that language is rarely as simple as true or false. Variation 100. I contend that nothing I articulate holds any truth. When someone states, I contend that nothing I articulate holds any truth, they claim that every word they speak is completely without merit. In everyday terms, this means that every idea, every sentence they share is untrue. However, if you take this assertion seriously, then even the sentence making the claim must lack truth. Yet, if that sentence is untrue, then it implies that some of what they articulate might indeed be true, creating a clear contradiction. Consider a person in a casual conversation saying, I contend that nothing I articulate holds any truth. First, it might sound like a hyperbolic statement meant to be humorous. But on closer examination, the statement forces you to face a puzzle. If nothing they say is true, then this declaration too must be false, which means there is at least one true element in their speech. This self-referential twist pushes the limits of our understanding of honesty. We generally assume that even those who are known for their fabrications might inadvertently speak a truth now and then. The claim, nothing I articulate holds any truth, leaves no space for that possibility, and when applied to itself, it collapses into a loop of contradiction. Ultimately, I contend that nothing I articulate holds any truth is more than just a dramatic statement. It's a thought-provoking riddle. It challenges us to reconsider how we determine what is true and false, and it shows that language, when it talks about itself, can become a maze of endless questions. This playful paradox invites you to explore the complexities of honesty, leaving you with a delightful puzzle about the nature of truth in everyday communication.